Well, that's the quietest meeting I've ever heard. Uh,
Aye.
That's the quietest meeting I've ever heard. Uh,
Aye.
We're back in open session again. Planning Commission has joined us. Chair Polk, does the Planning Commission wish to approve their agenda?
I believe the Planning Commission is involved in two of the public hearing items, items 6.2 and items 6.3, if I'm not mistaken. I'll entertain a motion from the Planning Commission to approve that as the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Then
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Please join us in a moment of silence and the pledge.
United States of America, and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will next have public comment time. There are several opportunities this evening to have public comment because of the public hearings, but this one right now is general public comment time. So has anyone signed up? Have we received any phone calls, emails, or communication of any type? Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. Okay. And next we have proclamation. It is a proclamation to designate May 20th, 2020 as National Donate a Lunch Day. Whereas almost 30 million Americans have filed for unemployment during these difficult times as COVID-19 spreads, and whereas over 15 million households suffer from food insecurity, of which more than 6 million households suffer from severe form of food insecurity before COVID-19, and whereas the observance of the National Donate a Lunch Day provides an opportunity to support food security programs for Humanity First USA that provide vital and critical services by donating food, volunteering, and raising awareness about hunger issues in the U.S. And whereas the campaign encourages its supporters to skip lunch on May 20th, 2020 and donate their lunch money to feed fellow Americans. And whereas this organization has hundreds of caring volunteers across the U.S. who donate their time, vehicles, gasoline, and energy to deliver thousands of meals annually to our fellow citizens in the U.S., especially under the HF We Care campaign in response to COVID-19. And Humanity is consistently providing financial support and food distribution to local food banks and pantries through funds raised under Food Security Program. Now therefore, I, Jeanette Rischel, Mayor of the City of Manassas Park, Virginia, do hereby proclaim May 20th, 2020 as National. I urge every citizen to take time on this day to honor the National Donate a Lunch Day, the people it will serve, and the volunteers who care for them. Our recognition of and involvement in the National Donate a Lunch Day can enrich our entire community and help combat hunger in America. Do we have a motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have a MAP clinic update.
Before we do that, we do need to certify the closed session.
We did. We also certified. do you,
So the motion would be to authorize an appraisal to be done on Lot 1A, which is at the railroad tracks and Manassas Drive, and then also Lots 2 and 3 on Connor Drive.
do we have a
And
motion?
those are in the amounts, I'm sorry, in the amounts of $10,000, $10,000, and $8,000 respectively.
Okay. All in favor? Folks at home?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you.
One abstain.
One, for the record. Let's see, you-
Councilman, member Javed.
Okay, okay, just so that Lena gets it, okay, okay. And next is the MAP clinic presentation,
Okay.
is that correct?
Yes, good evening, Mayor. And I will open up. And Prince William Health District. Let me get this on full page.
Hi, everyone. It's actually Dr. Rebecca Sutter.
Okay.
I've had the honor of presenting in front of you guys a while ago, so I'm happy to be back, virtual or not. It's our new world, right? So, do you want me just to go ahead and jump in, and then Amanda, feel free to kind of jump in if I missed anything with that. I think you know that we push really hard to figure out how we can actually increase testing in all of our communities, and specifically for Manassas Park, we've really been aggressive in moving towards getting this test sampling and testing that we need to really kind of understand how we can get on top of what's happening. And so we were lucky about 2 weeks ago that Virginia Department of Health identified under and uninsured populations as being on a high priority for testing. And so 2 weeks ago, we did start our sampling and testing in Manassas Park, Mason and Partners clinics. That has served as our only open and continued access for across all 10 of our MAP locations. Manassas Park, as you all know, is our one of our hub sites and our largest clinic. And so we have remained open through without any lapse in any care for any of our populations throughout. Every Tuesday and Thursday we're open, and then like I said 2 weeks ago we started the sampling and testing. Next slide, please. This is a great slide that was put together by your team. We have partnered with Virginia Department of Health this week to offer an aggressive move towards getting sampling and testing for these populations. And so we are offering now Monday through Friday for this week full testing. Every day, which will really kind of help. I'll highlight just today's testing numbers. Our goal has always been to get 50 per day. If we feel like we can get 50 people tested, then we feel like we've really kind of been able to impact the community. So today we tested 52 clients through the drive up and walk up sites, and at the same time we were able to actually train 27 medical reserve corps members, volunteers, so that tomorrow when they show up to do their testing, they will be fully prepared. I'm really, really proud of what the Mason Partners team has been able to do, and equally what the Medical Reserve Corps volunteers were able to take their time, show up, and really learn today so that tomorrow they'll be able to do this a similar impact as we have. I'll go to the next slide. This is just a slide that I wanted to highlight. Prior to the end of April, it was really difficult for us to get our most vulnerable in our communities tested. The under and uninsured were not covered under the CARES Act provision, therefore, and those that did not have insurance. So they, if they were to go get tested, there would be a cost for commercial labs of about $70, $59 to $70. And if they were going to any urgent care, any other testing sites, it was costing them upwards of about $200 when they had to be seen for a visit, and then the testing on top of it. So it almost became a huge barrier. So we were extremely grateful when Virginia Department of Health added the under and uninsured, again, the end of April as being a high priority under the public health lab testings. This again was the pivot that we needed in order to really kind of get the testing in place. Next slide. I want to talk just briefly about a few things. One is there's a difference between sampling and testing. So sampling is what we're doing presently at the Mason and Partners Clinic. And what that means is that we're actually getting the sample and be able to send it to the laboratory to be tested. We are using Virginia State Lab processes, one in Fairfax, and then we also have access to one in Richmond. So we are able to get sample after sample after sample through a drive-in process and a really tight protocols that have been developed over the past few weeks to get us to be able to do the numbers that we're getting to. So as you can see here as an example, I want to highlight that the Mason and Partners in the Manassas Park community was actually highlighted last Friday in the governor's report as being an exemplar for the drive-through testing and getting to the communities that need it. So Manassas Park was in the governor's update last Friday through this process. Next slide, please. I just want to highlight how quickly the process can be, the drive up and walk up process can go. We really have only been limited by the ability for us to get sampling kits or the actual things that we need, the swabs and the medium to get it to the lab. So again, with Virginia Department of Health partnering with us this week, we now have 250 tests that are in our refrigerator and ready to be used, and we're super excited that we'll be able to get this these numbers that we are where we are. So I want to highlight how quickly this process goes. This picture on the left of your screen is 9 a.m. in the morning. Before we even show up in the morning, there's been lines like this, and then you can see the walk-ups that are in the chairs there. In 2.5 hours, we are able to process that many people. So we've really gotten extremely efficient in getting our numbers where they are. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about what we do. Everybody will get this exact from Virginia Department of Health, this handout when they come. So we want to make sure everybody understands what it means to have a positive, what it means to have a negative, and to really understand that even if somebody's diagnostic test were to come back, or serologic test would come back negative, and they still had symptoms, we still would tell them to do the same treatment and isolate themselves until they have 10 days of improving symptoms, with 3 of those days at least without any fever and no medication to mask that fever. So although we're very grateful to have this testing, we still want to understand that the negative test, but with symptoms, we would still treat them as what we would consider a presumptive positive because of the variability in the testing results. So everyone goes home with some sort of education around what they can do, what do these tests mean. One of the things that we get most is they require a letter to return to work. And so that is absolutely our biggest request when we call to give them the positive results. So we are able to provide that. After the 10 days, they have, again, having improving symptoms after 10 days and 3 days of no fever. So we're really trying to monitor. We do daily symptom check-ins for all of our COVID positives, so they get a really high touch to ensure that they are getting what they need. As you know, part of the Mason and Partners goal is to be a very integrated model. So we actually have been also offering behavioral health support. As you know, this is a time of high anxiety. Certainly isolation can lead to increased depression and other concerns. We also have a really dynamic team of community health workers and medical assistants that are very sensitive to the culture and have really been able to kind of be the touch that everyone needs and be able to connect them to the rest of the team itself as well. So we're proud of that work. Next slide. The next phase of this, and I don't know if, who's on from Virginia Department of Health? Amanda, are you on? Yeah. The next stage of it, our whole goal in May has been to really push for testing. The next phase of Virginia Department of Health is going to go towards case tracing or contact tracing. What that means is that we need to be able to identify those that are infected and put out little fires before they become big infernos like we have now. And so there's gonna be an aggressive push towards this contact and case tracing. We're really, it's really important that we partner again with Virginia Department of Health to kind of assist where we can in that. Amanda, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about Virginia Department of Health's priority on that.
No, Becky, you did a really great job at highlighting a lot of these things. So as she had mentioned, right now we're test. So the month of May focus was we need to test as many people as possible come June in order to help mitigate the spread and like stop the spread of COVID-19. The biggest thing that we need to push in June is case tracing. And this will be done by lots of phone calls, lots of alerts going out to people who have been in contact with a positive COVID and telling them to isolate. So moving forward, it's still going to be a big push, but the Virginia Department of Health is still here to assist, Becky and her team in any way that we can moving forward.
So a lot of questions that I get are, so although we're partnering this week with Virginia Department of Health on our big testing push, what will happen after this? The Mason Partners Clinic are certainly going to continue on our testing. We will continue to push for as hard as we can to get the testing, and certainly we know that Virginia Department of Health and specifically Prince William Health District will always be there with us. We just won't be able to do the Monday through Friday. We will continue to do what we can for our capacity, which is Tuesday and Thursday. And then if we again get a need for that increased testing perspective that Amanda comes and says, hey, we need to test some more, we're certainly ready to partner on that aspect again as well. So the next slide really is just open for questions, and we really just need to all be on top of this, working together in partnership to really move this community. I want to let you know that when I looked at our numbers today, and these numbers vary depending on the testing day that we have, but we are about a 64% positive rate on our testing as we get them, which is significantly higher, as you know, from the average. What that tells us, Amanda and I, is that we're actually testing the right people, and we're actually getting the people tested in the communities that need us the most. And so we're proud of the work that we've been able to do, and we thank you for your continued support. And today when we showed up and there were MRC volunteers and there were Manassas Park supports that were just there. Keith was there, and everyone from the community center that can really make this possible. It really shows about the power of this community. We're proud to be a part of Manassas Park.
Well, thank you, and we're proud to have you as a part of Manassas Park. We'll start with questions and comments. Let's start with the folks at home. Councilmember Machado, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you so much for all you do constantly in the math clinic. We really appreciate all the work that you do. So in the slides, it shows that from Monday to Friday, but actually you're doing it only Tuesdays and Thursdays.
So presently this week we are doing it for the rest of the week now. Normally we've been doing it Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is the capacity that we have from our own workforce to do it that way. And honestly, we haven't had the testing and sampling kits to kind of ramp up bigger than or higher than that. So this week we will have either Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday the remainder of this week. And then next week we'll go back to Tuesdays and Thursdays again, unless Prince William and the Virginia Department of Health needs us to ramp that up again in support with the MRC.
I have a following question. Who decides who is a high priority patient?
So we take our guidance from Virginia Department of Health, who takes their guidance from the CDC. And then, so for our priority population is the under and uninsured. So we always take appointments with 703-993-5880, which allows us to get the administrative process in place prior to the client or patient coming to the clinics. It makes the process quicker for both us and them. When we have walk-ins that come outside of the support for the Medical Reserve Corps, we actually have to get permission from Virginia Department of Health to test. We haven't had any difficulty at all with that. It just sometimes can administratively slow the process down. With MRC support the rest of the week, we will be able to get kind of an umbrella approval under an event ID that will speed up that process. But next week we will go back again to that process of getting individual approvals.
Thank you.
Is that it, Councilmember Machado?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Dr. Slade, for the presentation. In regards to people that are uninsured, do they need to meet a certain criteria financially or not at all?
So the MAP clinic is a complete no barrier model, which means that we don't look at any finances. We really believe in just showing up and we provide the care and then we work through that. So there is no requirements ever for the MAP clinics, including the testing protocols that we're doing now. If you disclose you're uninsured and underinsured, then we take care of you.
Thank you. And also for, let's say if there's a household member that tested positive and there's another household member that is asymptomatic, can that person who's asymptomatic be tested or no?
That's a great question, and that changes regularly with the Virginia Department of Health. What I can say is that they would have what we call an epi-link, which means that they would be directly exposed to somebody that was a known positive. In that case, we would almost presume them to be becoming positive. We would tell them to quarantine for 14 days. Any symptoms at all, we would be able to test them. At this time, though, Virginia Department of Health has loosened that a little bit over this May period and has been able to say just test, test, test. So we have to take everything on a case-by-case basis, but I can say at this time we have been able to get testing for them.
Thank you so much.
Amanda, if I said that wrong, you can correct me.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Vice Mayor Banks?
Positive rate, does that mean it's 64% of the people that get tested come up positive for COVID-19?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, and
I was actually surprised as well.
yeah,
Obviously, that varies day by day, but 64% over the course of our sampling time, it's significant.
do you know, I mean, are they hospitalized or are they just asymptomatic?
We've had a few that we've sent to the hospital. Again, that's why we really monitor for daily symptoms over that time frame. Some people will be very mild symptoms, but some people get acute, and we have definitely, and typically we send them to the hospital for chest pain and shortness of breath. Those are our two number one referrals. The fever is not that problematic for people. They're tolerating that pretty well. It's when they get the shortness of breath and the chest pain that we immediately send them. So we have had a mix of either going to the hospital or they just improve with very minor mild symptoms, very consistent with what the rest of the country is seeing.
And my final question is, if that's 64%, is that the norm of clinics and other facilities that are doing testing, or where does that rate?
It's high. No, it's significantly
high.
high. But what it tells us, Amanda and I, when we look at that, is that we're actually in the communities that need us, and they're getting to the people that need us. I can tell you that most of those that we've been able to test have been those that are still frontline working, and certainly live in households that have multiple people in it, and so they would automatically be at a higher risk anyway. So 64% is significantly higher than the national. But it's, I think, consistent with the communities that are similar. Amanda, I don't know if I can comment on any of the other localities within Prince William, but there are certainly hot spots within Prince William County that are seeing similar, but they would be exactly with what you expect in households that have many people that are frontline workers that have had limited access to testing prior to this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for doing this in Manassas Park. We're glad to have you. And, I'm glad we're finding the people that are positive and getting them the help that they need, because, testing 200 people that are negative isn't always so helpful. It's testing 200 people that are positive. I don't know. I had one question was, what about people that are insured? Do you take people that are insured, and do you take insurance? I know it seems odd, but you know?
So we do not. So
Okay.
we really feel like we are filling gaps for those that don't have other resources. So if there is an insured, we absolutely hand out, we have a list of places that they can go within the county, that they can go and their insurance will cover it. The CARES Act was very good about covering COVID-19 testing for those with insurance. So access to that testing is not a barrier if you have insurance. So we actually won't do the testing because we can't use those resources from the state because they don't fit in the criteria for under the state laboratory. Can you go back to the, I don't know what slide number was, I think it was slide number 3. It will show the priority areas for commercial versus the state laboratory. Oh, the next one. Yeah, right there. So right there you can see that the private and commercial laboratories, those would be the ones that had insurance, and then you can consider the uninsured where we see the public health lab testing priorities sitting there under uninsured with that. And so we wouldn't test them because we wouldn't utilize those resources.
Right. And I also just wanted to say thank you because it seems like you processed them very quickly. I saw they had at Hilton Chapel yesterday, they had people waiting for 4 and 5 hours to be tested because literally hundreds of people kind of swarmed, you know, the facility, and they were almost overwhelmed. So I'm so glad that you can, you know, get people in and get them out and not have excessive waits.
Yeah, you know, that is all in partnership with, you know, I mean, so many people showed up to support that initiative today, and I think that that's, you know, that's everyone involved in this whole, not just the sampling of the MAP clinic. It's a collective impact, I think.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. We thank you so very much. We thank you for all the work that you do in the community, and like I said before, we're thrilled to have you folks as a part of our city.
Well, you guys are part of our hearts, and certainly anything that we can ever do, just reach out. And again, thank you, as always, for your partnership.
Okay. Have a nice evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Okay, on to our public hearings. The first public hearing is for the governing body only and is vacation of public right-of-way. I declare the public hearing open. Dean, I think you're up.
Good evening, members of the governing body and guests, planning commissioners. This here is a vacation and abandonment of right-of-way. So in Virginia, if there's a public easement or right-of-way, there has to be an affirmative action to actually get rid of it. You can't just not use it. So we couldn't just go and dig up the pavement and then expect it to go away. So we need to take affirmative action. There's 2 things that are happening. We're vacating the plat that created the public right-of-way initially. And so you'll see there we have areas 1, 1A, 2, 2A, and 2B. Those are all the areas that would be vacated, and then those areas would also be abandoned as right-of-way. The ordinance that you have before you also reserves an ingress-egress easement and utility easement on those areas. So all those areas 1, 1A, 2, 2A, and 2B would also, after this is done, would still have an easement there that would allow for everything we're doing right now to continue to be done. So it doesn't really change what can be done there, but what it does do is that if you end up approving the comprehensive agreement that we hope to have before you on June 2nd, then we can move forward rather quickly. Now you'll notice up here those areas are numbered for a reason, because by law, when you vacate an area of a plat, it goes back to the original property. So you'll notice like area 1 there is going to become a part of lot 3-1, which is half of the piece. We may actually be on lot 3-1 right now, and then if we go to the commissioner's office, we'll be on lot 2. The same holds true for area 2, which will become part of lot 5B. Area 2A becomes a part of lot 5C. 2B and 1A both become part of lot 4-1, which is the what we've been calling the Bays tract. So recommendation is you approve this at your meeting on June 16th. And that is assuming, of course, that the comprehensive agreement is approved by you on June 2nd. So, any questions?
Comments, questions? Councilmember Machado, do you have any comments or questions?
I don't.
Councilmember Sendejas?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Last call here. Okay. Is there any public comment that has come in? Mr. Nguyen, do we have any public comment? Okay. And Lena, we don't. Okay. No public comment, so let's entertain a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor?
I
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. The public hearing is closed.
Mayor, if I could just
I-
add one thing real quick.
Yes, uh-huh.
So these areas that have just been subject to this ordinance are also going to be part of the rezoning that's coming up next. So just kind of make sure everyone understands that those pieces are going to be part of the rezoning along with the parcels that they are going to become a part of if you approve the
Are we
ordinance.
correct in assuming the Planning Commission will take this up at their June 3rd?
No,
Or
this
not?
is just strictly governing body
Okay,
here.
okay, understood. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. The next is a joint public hearing for both the governing body and the Planning Commission and is comprehensive plan amendment. I declare the public hearing open. Calvin prepared a wonderful video, which was loaded onto the city's YouTube site. I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at it. Okay. Is there, yes. Are you there, Calvin?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, thank
I'm
you.
not sure,
That was,
since I pre-recorded the presentation, I'm not sure that I need to present the entire thing again.
No, Calvin, no. Hold off.
Close the-
No. We're just here to, so let me start off. So thank you, members of the governing body and planning commission, since this is a joint meeting. So we had Calvin and Mickey pre-record their messages for this item and the next one because we don't want to go to 1 a.m. again like a few weeks ago. I will actually be doing a presentation on the phase 3 and phase 4 kind of concept plans, land stuff. I know that's a big issue for the public, but we wanted to expedite these and provide these presentations. But Calvin is available. Thank you very much, Calvin, for answering any questions on this item and the next one. Mickey's not on the call, so if we have further questions that either Calvin, Dean, or myself are unable to answer related to the rezoning and all the waivers, we will follow up with Mickey when she gets back and get back to you all as well. So, yeah. Thank you,
any
Calvin.
comments or questions from either the Planning Commission or the governing body?
Bring one concern forward. I don't know that we all need any reminder, but there is a concern about parking from current residents that are not part of this even. But in terms of that, the transportation chapter, there's just at least the one here in the packet, there's very little on parking. But it's a very huge concern, and I wonder if we need to put some more thought into parking for current residents in current neighborhoods, particularly in where I live in the townhouses, because there are only 2 parking spaces for most of the townhouse units and in the condo units up in Outlook, Stonebridge 2, Section 2. That we're landlocked, and we have very little overflow parking in terms of public parking, and then we have people circling around. It's very wasteful in terms of time, gas, money, whatever, that we have people circulating around because, especially on a weekend, there is no extra parking anywhere. And, we also have the issue that we haven't resolved yet in terms of the cul-de-sacs down on the old side of Manassas Park. That didn't go away, we just haven't addressed it because with the COVID, we don't have the bandwidth right at the moment to do that. But those issues still exist. And so I guess I was just a little concerned there wasn't more in the parking section, because I feel like I had somebody approach me yesterday that lives in Outlook and who says, there's no parking. You get, 1 spot or 2 spots up in Outlook, and you're trying to find a spot on La Paz, and, the people that live in the rental community across the fence from us, because those vehicles aren't approved or they're not technically on the lease, they're parking on the pause and walking through the fence. So there's very little space, there's very little overflow parking for our current residents. And the comment was, well, we have all this parking in this plan for the new, but we don't have enough parking for the people that are already here, and we have no plan to remediate it. So I'm bringing it up in the context of this because I think we need to put a little more thought on the parking side.
Yeah, so I'll let Calvin afterwards kind of address how it's related to the comprehensive plan, but what I can tell you is, I mean, from an infrastructure standpoint, I'm not sure what other space there is for additional parking. To me, the only solution, again, would be the resident-only parking strategy, where communities petition to be resident-only parking in their areas. If that's something that you all want to address, I know that historically there was an ordinance crafted to that effect for us to reconsider that. I'm not sure that's directly related to the comprehensive plan, and Calvin, please correct me if I'm wrong, or what else can be done in the comp plan specifically to address Councilman Shoemaker's point.
So we tried to address what may perhaps be, an opening for policy changes as far as parking regulations. Mentioned a little bit about the potential for perhaps permit parking. We mentioned the fact that we're trying to clean up some of the illegal parking that's currently happening. We're trying to revisit, the way we utilize the yellow curve and the signs. And we've tried to address things in the comprehensive plan about potential policy changes in the future. And we mentioned the need for parking and the need to provide parking in the future. But to try to retrofit parking in the existing built environment is always very challenging. I'm not sure how the comp plan can guide already constructed development. We can certainly use the comprehensive plan to guide future development and to make policy changes on how we treat the existing built environment. But that's always going to be a challenge when we have older subdivisions that were built with less parking requirements, or that, houses that don't have anything but on-street parking, these issues arise. And it's always a challenge. I don't think we're the only jurisdiction that faces those challenges, but it's something we tried our best to discuss in the comprehensive plan amendment, the need to look at our policies and the need to sort of address the existing parking issues with policy changes, but how we would go about actually retrofitting parking in a built environment and already established subdivision is very, very challenging.
That was made was we're building a parking garage and we've got surface slots at VRE. Why can't Manassas Park residents park overnight? And I was trying to say that at least the VRE garage we won't own, but that idea, hey, we're going to build a parking garage for downtown development, but what about all the people that are already here? Like, why can't we park there in the evenings? Because VRE is not going to be there at night. That was right, wrong, or indifferent. That was what one of our residents said was, why aren't there distance lots, for lack of a better word, where people can park and then somebody can bring them to wherever they actually live? Because maybe they don't need to have a spot right in front of their house, but they need to have a spot. And, that they're just, it isn't even that the spot is not convenient, is that there are no spots available, as in none. As in, you circulate 10 times, there are no spots available. And, in terms of safety too, you're parking very far away from your home, and you're having to walk at night. And so that was one of the things that was brought up, is why can't Manassas Park residents park in the VRE garage at night when VRE is not using it? Because that would help with the overflow parking needs that we already have in the city.
So we would need the vehicles out before the first riders show up in the morning. So you could certainly, there would be a time. Yeah, so So
I
there
mean,
would
I'm
be a
just,
time.
I'm passing on, and it's not a bad idea, is that we're building a garage anyway, or we got the surface lots. You know, maybe we reserve, you know, maybe, I'm just throwing this out, maybe we reserve X amount of spaces, because, you know, not everybody's there at 5 a.m. I mean, you know, that's the first train is at 5:10 or 5:15, you know, and then you would require a decal, Manassas Park decal to park there.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
so
that
they would be paying personal property, and we know that they live in Manassas Park.
That would probably have to be part of the negotiations with the VRE, because we don't have the, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, we don't actually have an agreement on the VRE garage itself for how it's going to be shared between the city and, yeah, we have nothing. So maybe at that time, that would be the time to kind of bring up the idea for.
I'm bringing that
how we can
idea
do
up
that.
forward now so it doesn't get forgotten, because we have current needs for parking in many parts of the city, the old section of Manassas Park and the middle section of Manassas Park. And so I don't want that to get forgotten in the shuffle, and we get down to the end and it was never even brought up. So I'm bringing it up now, so to put it on people's radars that parking is an issue. And this, you know, I'm bringing up as part of this as a reminder that it still exists every day in the city.
Are you interested in the resident-only parking idea?
Not really, because Manassas does that and it's a mess. And frankly, they target a lot of minority areas, and the places with non-minority areas, they don't have the parking restrictions. It's real interesting how that works. So I think that there are people all across the city that we could use a distance lot of some kind. And, you know, we have needs in the city for parking with the people that are already here.
Well, with the neighborhood parking, it would be resident-driven. I mean, we wouldn't be imposing it.
Well, right, and maybe, you know, I'll have an offline discussion with you on this.
Right,
But
okay.
I mean, the issue is that you've got households with 4 and 5 drivers. It's not even that we need to have resident-only parking. There's still not enough. I mean, it's just not enough to have only resident-only parking, because, you know, real estate is very expensive here, and it takes 3 and 4 incomes to be able to support on some of these. So, I mean, she had a really great point, and I tend to agree with her, and I'd like to see us maybe have a distance slot. We're building parking for all of our new residents, but the people that are already here are saying, hey, we need parking too. We already have an established need, and they're all taxpayers.
Also remember,
go ahead.
no, so also remember, I think we have retail going down their development too, right? So you got movie theaters that don't get out right till midnight. First riders are 5 o'clock, so that parking garage is only going to be used for a couple hours. You have to, you know, they're going to take up space from consumers. And then secondly, I think, you know, if we open a lot for the whole city in the downtown development, then the residents from that downtown is going to have a shortage of parking, right? So then you're going to have basically a shortage from that development and from the old development as well. I mean, it's just not going to solve a problem, I don't think so.
We're not assuming the parking garage or the VRE parking is going to be overflow for residential, are we?
No, we're not.
No, I mean, usually it's supposed to be for retail, yeah.
No, it's not. You're right. The goal of the downtown parking is not to satisfy the residential component. It's to enable the retail. Just kind of been the discussion the whole time with across the street why that's empty. So it's always been about supporting retail. Is there a way maybe that we can evaluate? But to Councilman Javed's point, it's tough because of the hours of businesses we're trying to get here, and then the first riders that they show up. It's a very small window for our residents to be able to park there. I'm not sure that works for them to drop off their vehicle at 12:30 a.m., let's say, and then, you know, go back at 5 a.m. before they're, you know, right now there may not be that VRE demand, but I think it might build up to it. But I think it's worth evaluating if that's the demand from the public. We can certainly look at that. Yeah.
Have to specifically be in city center specifically, but it could be anywhere. I mean, you know, maybe we allow people to park at Costello Park overnight. I mean, you know, well, they're closed right now, but I mean, they're not open past 9 or 10. You know, instead of closing the gate down and saying, you know, you can't get in the lot at all, maybe we allow overflow parking there, and the requirement is you have to have a Manassas Park decal in order to park there, or you will be towed. I mean, the enforcement becomes very easy on that part. You have a decal, or we're going to tow you, you know, but for people that have issues with, you know, especially over on the old side where we have cul-de-sacs and streets with, limited parking, and, maybe we don't need all 6 cars at the house that you have, but maybe you need 4 of them, and 2 of them can be in the overflow. So that's all I'm just saying in terms of this, that maybe we need to think through the parking lot.
Well, that is definitely something staff can evaluate.
You would like, just to understand, you would like an actual call-out in the comprehensive plan that states to evaluate public parking spaces to open those up for residents?
Probably only because, like, the one at the community center already exists, you don't have to build another one.
Yeah.
I mean, we already have that infrastructure, we've already paid for it, that maybe we can use it as an extra benefit to our residents who, who are in dire need of parking. And, as we've all kind of alluded to, but I'll say the old side of Manassas Park has a lot more people in it than it used to. Not all the population growth from the city is Palisades or Dominion Crossing or Belmont Reserve. A lot of it is we're putting a lot more people into the houses that we already have, or the ones that get knocked down to the foundation and they go up and out and back and front and to the side. And now they're 3 times bigger than the house that they replaced. Well, they also have 3 times as many people in them too, because, families are building houses to house the families that they have. And so those, by definition, create more cars. But there's not additional street or driveway necessarily to accommodate
And the
them.
problem goes back to the fact that we're a landlocked city.
Well, right, I'm just trying to figure out if we can get some creative things, going that would have a direct positive impact to our residents. They would say, yep, the city got this right. I have parking even if it's not in front of my house. I have parking for my vehicle, for my work vehicle, et cetera, and that it made my daily life better.
Yes. You would want an action item on the comp plan that says for staff to evaluate utilizing existing public parking lots to satisfy the resident parking requirements.
I mean, with restrictions, let's say. I mean, we did do it for Runyon. I mean,
It's just for evaluate, so
We're
we
right,
would come
absolutely.
back and, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did it with Runyon, where the one family was able to build from our road and do a driveway into the backyard. I mean, that's something different that we did, and
Sort of like a generalized bullet point.
Yeah, it's just to evaluate.
Okay.
It's kind of like an action plan for staff, just to Calvin's point as well, evaluate, permitting, evaluate those. We'd want to throw these all on the table. If you all are in agreement, maybe that's something we can look at adding to the comprehensive plan
Yeah,
itself.
to Councilmember Shoemaker's point, I mean, the community center does have a lot of parking besides that main lot that's in front. I mean, you've got parking on the side of the baseball fields as well. And so we can utilize that space that's not being used during closing hours, take advantage of our decal like you mentioned, and meet a need that's there. I agree.
When it comes to the community center, in addition to staff, city staff, I would want the police department to evaluate that from a security perspective as well.
Yeah, that, when we say staff, it's going to be across the board, because that's
Across
going
the
to be the
board,
key
okay.
issue is how do we clear out the parking lot in the morning when we're ready to set up the community center? So we're going to have a police sweep of that area, and cars that are still there, we're going to tow. Right? It's because we have to allow for park. So that's going to create just a secondary issue of people complaining that you're towing our cars. So, I mean, when we say have staff evaluate, I'm talking about all staff, and to do a comprehensive analysis of what are all the pros and cons before we go ahead and do something like that. Because we need to hear from Jay, we need to hear from PD about what the issues are.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
we have, maybe it won't work here, but it would work over here, because I think any relief would be welcome.
Councilmember Machado, do you have any comments or questions on this?
Yes, I have 2 questions. First one is related to Donald's questions about the issue with parking. Are we going to have permitted parking for the entire Manassas Park residents?
Well, that was
And my second question is about the VRE access from Blooms to the VRE extension, because there are some parts of the streets that don't have sidewalks. If there is any plan to solve this?
Yeah, so I can address the first one, then I'll turn it over to Calvin for the sidewalks around the VRE station. So for the first point, that was an issue that was an idea brought up about evaluating what's called either permitted parking or resident-only parking. It's an available option for the governing body. It's something I think that should be evaluated, but there's no affirmative in the comprehensive plan or from city staff that's what we're doing. So it's an option available to the governing body to task staff to evaluate, but I'm not sure that's what the consensus is of the governing body. And then Calvin, I don't know if you want to address the sidewalks around the VRE station. Calvin, are you still there?
Sorry, are we discussing the proposed plan and the sidewalk
No.
plan?
No, I think we're talking about the comprehensive plan right now, a discussion, kind of what our vision is for kind of, I guess, pedestrian access to the VRE station with sidewalks.
Right. We're encouraging, multimodal development throughout the downtown and in the commercial district specifically. We're encouraging sidewalks on both sides of the street and bicycle amenities, with pedestrian amenities for people of all levels of mobility. So, we're trying to spell it out as clear as we can that we want the downtown to be truly multimodal and pedestrian friendly.
No, thank you.
Yes, in regards to parking, there might be some residents that want overnight guests to stay over. They might have a vehicle, so that's something to also consider. Based on my experience in the city of Alhambra, California, they would have a kiosk in City Hall or the police department where the person who came to visit within the city, they will get an overnight parking pass for $5. So would that be something to consider?
Yeah, so if we were to evaluate the pros and cons and implementation plan for a resident-only or permitted parking, however you want to call it, for a street or a neighborhood for the entire city, you're absolutely right. There would have to be provisions in place for issuance of those stickers, whether it's through the treasurer or the police department, and then also for the actual provision of visitor parking passes as well. So you're talking about increasing kind of staffing requirements. If you were to do something like that as well, you would probably need some kind of traffic enforcement, parking enforcement division in the police. So it does add resources, to your point about how it was done in that jurisdiction in California. But you're absolutely right. You would have to consider something about how you deal with visitor parking.
Thank you.
So what we explored was possible extensions of Connor Drive, either to or across Manassas Drive. Some of the alignments that we recommended were one extending Connor Drive to Market Street. So that Market Street already connects straight across Manassas Drive to Park Center Court. What we saw was that is a pretty viable alternative no matter what. And that may be an alternative that should always be in place and then potentially accompanied by another alignment of Connor Drive that either extends through the existing alleyway to the east of City Center, or that connects farther down closer to the railroad tracks. Mm-hmm. Each of those alignments has its own unique challenges that I pointed out in the presentation. There's Some of them involve more takings of commercial property than others. Some of them, we're not quite certain how it would work to have an access directly across the Manassas Drive, close to the tracks. But we really wanted to explore alternatives in and out of the VRE station, or the VRE parking garage, because currently we see the backup that exists on Railroad Drive when it lets out. And if we're exploring a downtown with further commercial development and residential development, and it's all supposed to pour out on Park Center Court, we're going to run out of queue space at certain times. Now, what the VRE's TIA for the garage showed was that it's very periodic. It's not consistent because trains don't unload every 10 minutes. They unload just several times a day, so you have that peak demand several times a day, and that's it. But when we're trying to develop a downtown or we're trying to be business friendly, we certainly don't want people to be discouraged by how hard it is to get in and out of the city center district. So we want to explore as many routes as possible. So we've explored northern routes out of the north side of the downtown. We've explored, several possible alignments for the extension of Connor Drive, one of which we think should happen at all costs, no matter what else might happen. And then, we also have sort of left it open with alternates and, a mixture of alternates. It's challenging because you don't want to limit people's ability to propose development plans, but you also don't want to have development that forgets the needs of new roadways in the downtown. And as much as roadways take up valuable development space, they're necessary to ensure that people enjoy their time and enjoy the living in the downtown, because you need to get people in and out as efficiently as possible. And we know how creative people will be. If you give them a route that everybody doesn't know about, the people that live in the area, frequent the area, will take that route, even if it is a few extra turns or a little bit out of the way, because they don't want to deal with the traffic. Yep. So just by providing alternative alignments, providing multiple ways across Manassas Drive, and from all directions out of the downtown, we're pretty sure people will find their way.
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea, especially the alignment of Connor Drive to Market Street, because you're allowing for that flow, for options for especially those that live in city center or Tina apartments. They can have another option besides taking Manassas Drive to get out. They can possibly go down Market Street to Connor Drive, and once we get Connor Drive extended on the other end of 28, they can get on 28 that way and not even touch Manassas Drive, which alleviates the traffic flow on that road.
Well, and the potential to shut off streets for a street fair is tremendous. Yeah.
Correct. So I think it was just good to give just a number of options for people to take different routes instead of just Manassas Drive.
I kind of like the one on the right versus I think you're talking about the one on the left.
Either one.
Which connects Market and Connor, but I kind of like this other one.
Either one.
I don't know what you call that, but it's
But
this one on the left because it would line up with the garage.
Well, I don't think we're choosing alignments tonight. We're just, it's a general conversation about transportation and approving the comp plan change.
And my last
Excuse
question,
me.
Calvin, was in regards to, I think you mentioned in your presentation about Mathis Avenue, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was supposed to connect to Old Centerville or somewhere in Manassas Park?
So there's been several iterations of that discussion over the years in trying to solve the Route 28 problem. And there was always discussion of a potential extension of Manassas Drive to Old Centerville Road because of, the detriment that it causes to Scott Drive and the residential neighborhood. One of the goals of a comprehensive plan is to provide harmony and to protect residents from from heavy traffic and the disharmony that comes with heavy peak hour traffic going down their busy residential streets. And we've always seen that, and we were to the point now where we're resurfacing Scott Drive every 3 years religiously, and to continue to have the residents on Scott Drive carry that burden is unnecessary, really. If we're going to use Scott Drive and the existing Scott Drive alignment as an extension of Mathis Avenue, it would almost certainly require some taking and some widening, and so that it wouldn't truly be a slow one-way residential street anymore. This alignment that's proposed here takes into account that we have a redevelopment district with tax incentives, and that there is a more harmonious alignment of Mathis Avenue, essentially going what is the alleyway behind the shopping center currently, that would get peak hour shortcutters to Old Centerville Road where they want to go without disrupting the residential neighborhood. That's the goal of this alignment, and yes, it had been proposed in the past to align Mathis Drive in some way with Scott Drive, and it certainly would help, but we would have to deal with the fact that we were then encouraging people to cut through a slow residential street, and they're not going to be driving slow, and they're not going to be driving politely and courteously. They're going to be in a hurry to get to work. So we're trying to propose an alignment that keeps the traffic away from the residential streets.
Encourage that, though? Don't we want the traffic to stay on 28? Especially with the regional, in terms of Fairfax widening 28 with the bypass or the widening of 28, do we then want to encourage people to come down Mathis and hit this new little extension and then take a left on Old Centerville where our residents live? Like, we're effectively encouraging that pattern to stay off 28, even though 28 should be getting better in the next few years.
Well, I think we're all very hopeful that some sort of a bypass emerges. That we get through the environmental study and environmental impact mitigation, and that something happens with a bypass, and we're all very hopeful that we achieve funding for the innovative intersections to improve the existing Route 28. And yes, Fairfax is moving forward with their widening, which will marry up perfectly with a bypass. But if there's one thing we've seen from the technical committee and all the modeling that was done on the Route 28 alternatives, it's that if we try to keep the traffic on Route 28, we'll be widening and widening and rewidening for many, many, many years, and we'll never see that much improvement on Centerville Road. It's getting as many available routes as possible that tends to really alleviate the traffic. People will be creative. They will take whichever route gets them out of the crowd. And the more routes you can provide, the more arteries you can provide, the faster things will move.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
I think we just have one remote member, Commissioner Collier. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, not now.
Okay, thank you. Chief?
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Have any public comments come in, emails, phone calls, anything? No? No? Okay. Well, hearing none, Chair Polk, does the planning...
I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing for the Planning Commission. Motion is
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We're closed.
Okay, thank you. The governing body will now close.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed, abstained, motion carries. Okay, assuming the Planning Commission takes this up on the 3rd, then we will take it up on the 16th. Is that correct, City Attorney?
Yeah, it is.
Is
I
that-
think
is-
that the chair.
Yeah, Chair Polk?
Say that.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the same thing,
Oh.
that the Planning Commission will have a meeting on June 3rd to consider this one and the next, consider action on this one and the next public hearing as well.
Okay,
All right,
thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, next is a joint public hearing for both the governing body and the planning commission, and is Phase 1A rezoning and associated waivers. I declare the public hearing open. Now, Mickey prepared a wonderful video on this, and I hope everybody had a chance to take a look at it. It was on the YouTube. Is there any further information from staff?
There is none. I'm just going to put up the map of the specific area that we're talking about right now for reference for the rezoning, specifically for Phase 1A of Roman numeral Phase 3 for the downtown development. But I have nothing further to add. I don't know, Dean, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this, again, we're doing this right now instead of doing the whole project at one time, mainly because of the VRE. So by doing this, if it gets approved, and that's one of the triggers that we're putting into the comprehensive agreement, which will then allow Norton Scott to move forward. Obviously, if the comprehensive agreement's not approved, this becomes unnecessary. So that's why the vote for this will be the 3rd on the at the Planning Commission and the 16th with the governing body, just because we want to make sure we have that comprehensive agreement in place. Again, if you decide not to approve the comprehensive agreement, then this becomes unnecessary, and I'm sure the Planning Commission will then recommend denial at that point. But I did want to point out that if this gets approved and we move forward with the comprehensive agreement, the rezoning for the next piece will then come into play, and a lot of what we're trying to put into the comprehensive agreement will then become proffered. Okay, so they're going to basically put proffers on the whole thing. So they'll take this rezoning, which is a city-initiated rezoning, and we can't put proffers on it because it's city-initiated. But they will then kind of encompass the entire project for the rezoning, and will at that time put proffers. So I just want to clarify, it's kind of an unusual way of doing it, but it's necessary just so we can get the property for the VRE garage. And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to the next public hearing, which is for the conveyance of property in Phase 3, which this is part of.
Okay. There have been questions about changes in various aspects of the zoning in the downtown. For example, the the residential commercial mix. So I would ask City Manager to please comment on how important the zoning changes are to really getting a better outcome for the development in the downtown. If you could.
So this was a big issue that we discussed back in the fall, and it was also a big part of the town hall as well, where we were trying to explain to residents about the 40-60 split, requiring 60% commercial, 40% residential, and then the amendment that we were talking about during that time when we were doing the town hall presentations to our residents about why that wasn't feasible. So just as a reminder, we've had a tax incentive package available, and we still do for the 40-60 split. That's still out there where developers can take advantage of some lucrative tax cuts if they build to that ratio. We've had that for, over 12 years. Dean, am I correct? Or the last decade at least that we've had?
It's been, I think we put that in back when Brian Lieber was on the council. That was his idea.
Yeah, and nothing has moved. By changing the ratios, we now have movement for development across the board. So when you have an incentive package, a government-focused incentive package for certain development, and no one's jumping on that, that means that it's just not market viable. That government's creating a fantasy about what could happen in an area, that it's not based off anything scientific or market-oriented about what can happen. The fact that when we change the percentage shares, but no longer provide tax breaks, and now you have developers interested, it shows that we've reached kind of a market viable project. The incentive packages, when you look at those, they're really only important when you have a market feasible project, but you're competing against other jurisdictions who also have that same market feasible project. And now a developer or business is debating, do I want like an Amazon? Think about what Amazon was doing over the last few years for HQ2. And there's multiple places like Atlanta, other great sites that they could have gone to, right? And so where incentives come into play is when you're in that competition, you're now offering a full package for why your area is great, but you want to sell it beyond just those. No one just goes to an area because of the incentives. There has to be something else. First, a market reality and then some other benefits for why they want to go to that area. So that's why we had to adjust the ratios of share of residential to commercial to what they were before. We still have those in place, so that's, we didn't get rid of those. They're still in as an option, but the only ones that have, the other option that we've now created is the one that developers are actually interested in pursuing. I just want to note, we do have members of Norton Scott on the call as well, if we have any questions for them as well.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for that explanation. Thank you.
I had a comment about several of them. We're supposed to be doing a pedestrian, multimodal, all the buzzwords, but one of these requirements is to not have a sidewalk on both sides of the street. We're being asked to waive that, which seems to be the opposite of what we're trying to encourage. Right. I mean, it's contradictory. It's waiver 20-04F is for the sidewalk. So I mean, I'm not really sure why they're asking for a waiver from sidewalk in what's supposed to be a pedestrian-friendly environment. In addition to that, would be waiver 20-04L, which is to reduce the amount of bicycle parking, which I would like to see more, not less. I mean, as a bicyclist myself, I'm more likely to go someplace that has bike racks that are nice and that are integrated into the community. We're being asked to reduce them from 44 space, or excuse me, I think it's 60 spaces down to 15 for the whole development. Well, we could get on the network. They have biking groups that have courses set out. If we're a bike-friendly community, we could get groups of people to come in on bikes and put us on the map, because they'll go a decent amount of distance on a bike out of the way in order if there is a safe place and a convenient place for them to be. So at least as written, I can't support that one. Because I think if our stated goal is multimodal, we're being asked to waive things, which I can't imagine that's a cost. That's a huge cost. Bike racks can't be that big of a cost. I mean,
Well, 60 seems excessive, though.
Well, I mean, if you spread them out over a large area, I mean, you're going to have 174 residences. People are going to have bikes, and if the parking is limited, they don't want to put bikes in garages. They need to put cars in garages. So there isn't going to be a space. Somebody that lives on the third floor is not going to hike that bike up to the third floor to put it in their house. It's just not going to happen. And so the people that live there need to have spaces they can lock bikes up to that are convenient and that encourage use of bikes. So those are definitely two that jumped out at me that I know I can't support as written, because I feel like that is the opposite of what we're trying to encourage with this development. Along with 20-04A, which is my previous objection to it. I mean, I'm not going to rehash it, but it's my previous objection to it, and I'm not going to support it.
So the two concerns, the first one is the sidewalks, waiver of having them on both sides, and then the second is the ratio of bike parking. So Calvin, if you can address those first, and then someone from Norton Scott, if you'd like to add additional context as well. So Calvin first.
Yeah, well, so the bike parking's been very interesting as we've looked at other developments, even the VRE garage and what their square footage requirements would trigger as far as bicycle spaces. It's become clear to staff that we actually need to revisit the number that's in our table, because the 45,000 square foot office space at phase 2A of the 8-acre facility was going to require, I think, 50-some bike racks. And so the VRE garage at one time was pointed out by the designer for the VRE garage that it was going to require, I think, 60-some bicycle spaces just for the VRE garage. Because it's a simple tabulation based on square footage. So I think that some sort of waiver for, I think 60 bicycle spaces may be excessive. And I think we need to revisit, the tabulation and how we handle that, perhaps provide different criteria, different numbers for different uses. But, I agree, we need bicycle spaces in the downtown. I just am not sure that what's in our parking ordinance doesn't need to be revised. I think it is a little excessive. The parking on the sidewalk on both sides of the street, when you're trying to maximize, best possible use of land in a downtown urban development district, sometimes you have to provide the pedestrian amenities where they make the most sense, and you have to make sure that that you have a fluid path for pedestrians, that you are encouraging safe pedestrian access to all spaces, but sometimes expanding that right of way can really fail to maximize the best use of the space. We have not published any sort of comprehensive urban development guidelines, and we're like many of our neighbors, we've just never published such a thing. So our developers are shooting from the hip, trying to maximize the use of the space, and they are taking pedestrians into account, but they are trying to maximize the use of a small area. So that's one of those things that we're going to have to weigh is, do we maximize the square footage and the acreage, or do we stick tight to our requirements and our recommendations, as long as there are good pedestrian paths of travel that are consistent, that make good sense? Is having sidewalk on both sides of the street absolutely necessary? No, it's our policy, has been our policy in our comprehensive plan for a long time in our residential areas that, we only really need, we would desire sidewalk on both sides of the street, but we only really need sidewalk on one side of the street. So is there a right or a wrong here? I'm not sure. I think that, we need to weigh our options, and as long as pedestrians are accounted for and they're safe and they're protected and they have a good path of travel, I think we've, met our intentions.
So someone from Norton Scott, Chelsea, I don't know if you're on.
Yeah, Lazo, this is Matt Marshall from Land Design Consultants. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Good. So we've actually had discussions, albeit somewhat briefly, over the last 3 weeks with Calvin and staff, and our goals, I would say, are aligned. What we have is we've got a very urban development, and it's not about maximizing space so much in my estimation. It's really about, we've got alleyways in the residential communities, a residential component that are rear loaded, and we've got segments of streets where you aren't going to have connected sidewalks because you have driveway, for instance, driveway. So there are very small segments in the alleyways only where there are not sidewalks on both sides of the street. That is it. The main thoroughfares and the main paths whereby pedestrians would walk from their homes to the VRE or to the downtown absolutely have amenity panels and sidewalks on both sides of the street. So it's only in a very rare couple of cases where this instance applies. We agree that we need pedestrian accommodation, and they need to be robust. There just are certain areas where, one, either they don't make sense or not logical, where they will not be used, or two, they're in conflict with driveways and the rear-loaded alleyways for the 2/2 unit.
About the reducing the private street width. I was just wondering what the fire department's take on this is. Are they viewing any problems with the smaller streets?
Calvin, do you want to address that? I can add as well.
So we've actually had, Matt and Robert Gilmer, the fire marshal, we've had conferences, phone conferences, online meetings, with Mickey, and we've discussed many of these waivers specifically, and the street width one was something that did initially trigger some concerns and comments from the fire marshal, and then after extensive discussion about it and the need for access to places, we're now using mountable curb, trying to provide turnarounds in all the right places. So, where it's not one size fits all, and no pun intended, to say that we have to have a street this wide. Well, it depends on the access route for the apparatus. Can the apparatus get to everywhere they need to get? Can emergency vehicles get in and out and quickly and safely? And I think after all of our discussions with Matt and the changes that he's made to the plan, I have not heard any further concerns from the fire marshal at this time. So I'd say that we initially had some serious concerns. We had some group meetings to discuss them, and we've made changes to the plan accordingly. So.
If I can just make a comment here as well. So there's a couple different stages here. So right now we're talking about the overall rezoning. When we get down to the point where we're actually putting together the site plan, the fire marshal has to sign off on that then as well. So I mean, I appreciate the question about whether or not the fire trucks will be able to maneuver in here, but ultimately the final approval will occur at site plan review.
Yeah, I got one. I guess this is waiver H. The buffer between the railroad right-of-way and the residential use has been reduced from 100 to 25 feet. To me, that seems to me like almost like a safety concern for residential residents living in that right-of-way. Why was that reduced?
Where that's happening. So someone from Norton Scott, if you want to take that, and then Calvin, feel free to add anything else as well.
So Matt Marshall again with Land Design Consultants. I'm happy to give a little bit of information. So we did provide some actual examples of numerous areas in different localities where a similar circumstance exists. Other localities, for example, look at not just the distance from the unit to the right-of-way, they actually look at the distance from the unit to the railroad tracks, actually the center line of the tracks or the most near track. And what we have here is very consistent with what you would see, for example, at Potomac Yards in the city of Alexandria and numerous other places. If you probably saw, there's a list of examples in the waiver narrative as well as a sample kind of photograph illustrative, and that's the reason for the justification. We're trying to create an urban setting that you would see where a train would be passing down a downtown setting or circumstance, and having 100-foot setback from that defeats that purpose.
Oh, sorry, I missed the last part. If you can repeat the last sentence.
The last sentence was, if you have a 100-foot buffer from the right-of-way, which is what's currently codified, that distance would eliminate the urban setting that we're trying to create in this environment. It reduces the walkability, it reduces all of the things we're trying to achieve by creating a sense of place and creating a sense of downtown.
I mean, I think this is, I see this in a metro setting, light rail. I mean, this is an actual train that passes by, and noise restraints, and I mean, this is a heavy, southern Norfolk goes on this track. Yeah, there's freight trains on this track. It's not a light rail, so I think that, I mean, I know you were going for the urban feel, but just reducing that to 25 feet from a residential, I don't know how feasible that would be.
It's feasible. I mean, to his point, there's many examples.
Yeah.
Northern Virginia, same line as well.
With the same railroad track.
Receiv's point, Javed's point, that it says the development is providing a 49-foot horizontal clearance measured from the center line of the railroad tracks to the building face. Staff anticipates that noise from trains and the abutting industrial uses will be a concern for future residents. And so I guess the question is that will there be a line, I don't know what you want to call it, or a chunk of them in the residential that can't sell because they're too close? And you know what I mean, is that they're too close. I mean, maybe the ones that are further in won't have a problem, but that some of the ones that are on the ends in the picture, and like the one row, like maybe those will be harder to sell because people won't want to live that close.
Yeah, I mean, it would devalue the property.
It's not the Elm Street development, right? They have a buffer, so that is something that staff, has raised, that we want to make sure that whatever happens in this development, there's some kind of noise protection mechanism for those residents, because to your point, feasible. Well, it's a lot where the residential units are, a lot higher than something in the wall or something, I believe, does need to be put there to ensure that noise mitigation. So that was the reason why staff has raised that concern.
Ed's point about what about train derailment? Because if it's that close, not saying it's 49 feet, the safety side of it, if it's that close, that if the train comes off the track and it falls over, I mean, those trains, the train cars are already very high. I don't know how high a train car is, maybe 15 feet or 20 feet. If you only have housing that's 25 or 30 or 40 feet, that's, I mean, maybe somebody that knows it better than I know, but,
That's 20 feet right there.
Say it again?
I say where I'm sitting to the wall is probably 20 feet. Look how close.
So again, this exists, throughout Northern Virginia. It's a risk in areas. Urban concept that we're trying to create. And number two, again, there is that significant elevation. The majority of those units would not. Much higher the actual elevation is from the train, they wouldn't be at risk for something like that. I don't know if, Matt, if you're still on, if you can comment on kind of safety from train derailment.
Topographically speaking, Leslie, the units are higher, so there's a vertical barrier effectively there simply by the topography alone.
You asked that you all walk.
What is I think Potomac Shores?
Potomac Yard?
The one out in Dumfries?
Potomac Yard.
Potomac Yard.
No.
So
Potomac Yard, this is in Alexandria. That one is largely flat in some places.
It is. I mean, the train track is right next to houses.
Well, I'm saying there is
This, for example, has 10, 12.
Go ahead, you can finish, sorry.
What is the height of the barrier?
Yeah, so no, in terms of height, there's 10, 12 feet of rise from the tracks in some cases even more than that, along the tracks where the majority of the residential component is located.
10 to 12 feet, is that what I heard?
Yeah, that seems to be the minimum.
Okay, thank you.
What's different on this side?
Follow up on Councilmember Javed's question about the train, and that is the in terms of the 2x2s themselves, and are they going to be built so they can withstand the noise? Because that's one of the things I saw when I made the trip to Chantilly and looked at the Toll Brothers development. It was, thank goodness, it's still under construction. I was looking at the 2x2s, and I can walk around and see just the quality of the drywall, and is it going to be built to withstand that noise of the train and the freight trains going by, as well as the train horn, which blows at all sorts of hours?
Sometimes the units will shake too.
Yeah, the units will shake. I mean,
there's people that say the units shake when the train passes.
And the trains, like Councilmember Javed mentioned, they go very fast, especially the freight trains late at night, and the Amtrak train. Forgot about that one.
Yeah.
So That's my question, just about the quality of the materials being used to build the 2x2s next to the train tracks.
Sure, absolutely. It's actually funny. It's ironic, maybe. I was actually in a hearing last night for a community we're developing in the flight path to Dulles Airport. And there was obviously a lot of concern there about airport noise. Is it 60 decibels, 65 decibels? What's the interior decibel level as planes fly over at roughly 1,000 feet? If you have a jumbo jet or a 777, or used to have before they just retired their fleet, what is that noise? And generally speaking, standard construction practices that are utilized in today's market will reduce the interior dBA, in this example, to 45, which is just the ambient noise that you would hear any place. So the standard construction materials that would be utilized in these buildings will achieve the desired ambient noise level inside the unit.
That'll also be dealt with during the review process.
Okay.
Councilmember Machado, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have. I have one for the waiver 20-04L about modifying the bicycle parking to one for each 5,000 gross square feet. Can you state the reason why we need to change that from what it is to the modification?
Yeah, so I'll let Calvin answer that again, and Matt, feel free to chime in afterwards. But from my understanding, with speaking with our planning and zoning administrator, it's not consistent what's out there in the rest of this region. If we're trying to pursue a competitive town center, we don't want to have an additional regulatory burden when our market feasibility is already more at risk than other town centers. But that's kind of some additional context to that. And then Matt, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I would just, again, what is in our tabulated requirements in our zoning ordinance has been questioned by every developer that's presented, including VRE themselves. VRE certainly wants to be bicycle friendly and encourage multimodal access to their facilities. It's a regional goal. But what we require is a bit excessive. Nobody sees that level of demand anywhere. So we haven't gone through the exercise of modifying our zoning ordinance yet, but staff already believes, just from several submissions and the challenges that developers have had and the questions they've had about, is that requirement even accurate? We understand that we need to take a second look at exactly how we require bicycle spaces. So again, I think some waiver is justified for the number of spaces in and of itself. The question is, are enough bicycle spaces being provided to meet the demand? I think that what would be required by our table is excessive and would not be utilized. But I think that there is a comfortable point somewhere, and there is justification for a waiver.
Yeah, and I'd like to just echo a similar stuff. And just one more thing, let me just follow up to that statement. I agree with Calvin 100%. The requirement or the rate that is required in the city is excessive, and it's almost to the point where it has to be almost a typo. For example, Fairfax County, Arlington County, and even DC, their range is 1 to 5%. DC is 2%. We're simply seeking to match what DC or Arlington or the metro stations do in Fairfax County, Tysons, Reston. All we're doing is basically matching what everyone else sees as the demand. We're not seeking to reduce costs by eliminating bikes with the ability to actually store your bicycles. We're simply just matching what other urban areas do that they see as most beneficial.
Yes, you're saying that we are trying to match what Arlington, for example, offers. Since we want the culture to change from, if they live in downtown, the downtown development, and they want to use the VRE, we would like the culture to change. Instead of taking the car and park it in the rear garage, use the bike, walk, or use the scooter, for example. So it's a mentality, a way of living that we need to move towards all the time. But if you're saying that the changes will be comparable to what Arlington has right now, and I always look to
Correct.
Arlington for better ways of transportation, where people walk, bike, run, etc. And my other question is about, let me just bring it up. The modification or section 404 plate for Roman 4A note 4. It says distinct cul-de-sacs must be constructed where streets and parking bay begins. And to modify, to eliminate the cul-de-sac requirement. Would you elaborate what that means?
Sure, I'm happy. And Calvin, feel free to correct me if I'm misstating something, but Park Center Court will no longer end in your typical cul-de-sac, which was evidenced by the vacation. So there will not be a traditional cul-de-sac at the terminus of the public street, and for that, we need a code modification.
Yeah, there's been several different opinions out there about cul-de-sac type development, and with an urban downtown, you definitely need to be focused on getting away from that cul-de-sac type development. The question is, are you providing safe turnaround access for emergency vehicles? And we've been through this, through the rough design. This is very preliminary, but we've been through it with the fire marshal, and again, with the use of mountable curbs. These are not long alleyways. These are very short alleyways, would not require cul-de-sacs or turnarounds in most of them. So, the absence of a cul-de-sac is not it's not something that we consider to be a real safety issue. May be inconvenient for some people that make wrong turns, but again, this is an urban downtown design. People are going to get lost and explore, and we kind of want that. We want people to hang out in our downtown and see what it's all about. So,
Have a follow-up on that, Councilmember Machado?
No, I'm okay. Thank you for your answers.
Okay. Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any, Vice Mayor Banks?
Yeah. So it's building, for building C specifically, your
Right.
retail pad?
Right, what's the reasoning behind
Well, it's
reducing
only
it
a
to 16
one-story,
feet?
it's only a one-story building. They're not looking for multi-levels.
Okay.
Remember, the commercial office is being developed on this side,
Mm-hmm.
right, where you have more space. This is simply a supportive standalone, either restaurant or retail or kind of combination to support the public plaza and whatever retail is going to go over here as well.
Okay.
So it might actually be easier from a restaurant standpoint to get someone here. Yeah, so if it's just the first floor, and because that enables options, that have been discussed before, whether you're going to sell the property or not to a standalone restaurant.
So does it allow for the possibility of it going higher than 16 feet? I'm thinking like a
built
downtown Manassas, CJ Finn's, they have a deck. And that would be perfect, especially in this time of social distancing, when people are encouraged to eat outside.
That's a good point. Matt, can you address that?
Which part of it, Leslie? What was the
So,
the question? Could you go higher?
Yeah, so it's a two-part question. So just to clarify, I got the second point was about exterior dining options kind of on the rooftop level is what you're talking about as one option if the building C allows for something like that. And is just to clarify, Vice Mayor, are you looking for the ability to construct the building so they can add an additional level, or is it just the
Right.
outdoor?
Can it go higher than 16 feet, or is that the limit in height?
Yeah, the 16 feet is just, so right now we have to have a certain height, which is intended to create a downtown
20 feet
elevation.
20 feet was the floor. We're simply lowering the floor to allow a single-story building in that instance. So we
That's
could
what I
go
was gonna
higher.
say.
Okay, so you
But we
could go
can't
higher.
under the current code.
Okay, thank you.
Just you can always go more, so it'd be like, well, never mind.
Great, thanks. And my second question's about waiver number 04C. So you're asking for parking on the private streets, which I'm looking, so that's for your residents. Is that, my concern about the development was always there's not enough parking. Is that to allow for parking for them because there's not enough, or why the waiver now, is what I'm asking.
You're talking about the on-street parking.
Right.
To allow on-street parking on
And
private
streets.
So why the waiver? So Matt, are you on?
It's 04C.
Well, we're asking for a waiver to allow parking on private streets, whereas currently there's a prohibition against it. So this allows us to add parallel parking on street where currently there's a prohibition.
So that's going to be something extra in addition to the parking that's going to be for each unit.
Correct. That is correct.
All right. Thanks.
There's a better image in the
Yes, sir.
attachment 2, because this is just kind of overarching, but if you open up that attachment 2, which is pasted separately on the website because the file is too big, but if you go to the agenda page, there's multiple
Got it. Because each unit's going to have a garage and that's the parking. Is that correct?
Each
A
unit has
driveway?
a garage and a full-depth driveway. So each unit has 2 full spaces allocated to it. Plus there's an accommodation for on-street parking as well, which is also enumerated in the code, in the zoning ordinance.
It's not, because the
So
development
Councilmember
I checked
Banks,
out in
yeah.
Chantilly
Mhm.
actually had a separate parking lot that's kind of behind the units. It's for everybody. It's like a community lot. So that was my main concern, and we just, Councilmember Shoemaker, a couple agenda items before mentioned parking's a big problem. I'm trying to prevent a new parking problem. So is the private parking enough parking for this development, is my question.
Yes. The parking that the city requires, that's currently required by code, is 40% more than your neighbor to the north, just for comparison. It's it's over 100% more than what you would see in Arlington County. So to have an allocated 2 dedicated spaces plus on-street parking for the residential component and what we see in 10 or 12 different jurisdictions in the area is absolutely adequate and very consistent with what we see in other communities of similar size and scale.
Okay, I accept that.
In fact,
but-
we revised the parking several years ago to increase the amount of parking for residential.
That's right, I remember
Yeah.
that. I accept that. I'm not going to try to compare us to Arlington in terms of parking, because Arlington has a lot more options in terms of transportation, whether it's taking the bus or the metro. They didn't get a new metro station. So they have more options in terms of them being able to move around versus Manassas Park. But thank you for that answer.
Have a question or comment?
I have a question, or a comment. Let me just check with the planning commissioners if that's okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
Commissioner Collier, any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Evans? Okay. It wasn't be a question, but I think it's more of a comment now after the clarification on the site plan review. But waivers A, C, and even E together, and looking at the concept diagram, so we've had some public streets in the city where we've gone back and forth on one-way or two-way, right? Because we've had parking on both sides, and did it really fit two-way? And we kind of bounced back and forth just to make it work. And so as I look at this concept diagram, at least, it doesn't seem to lend itself towards a one-way flow, right? Like an in and out. It lends itself towards a down to the end and then a back out. And so it's just a comment probably to be verified at site plan, but you shrink the roads, add parking, not clear if that's one or both sides, and then increase the volume through with all these waivers. And inevitably, the first purchaser doesn't drive a Prius or ride a Vespa. They own a Ford F-250 dually, and they drive all the way to the end. And then with increased traffic flow, you've kind of got bounce in and out. So I think it's just something to look at site plan, but those three waivers together, I had the same concern about ingress egress for emergency equipment. Those three together could create a problem if not managed. So I think it's just something we want to watch at site plan. Just
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We value your expertise. You've been on the Planning Commission for years. Yeah.
I just wanted to echo Councilmember Banks' comment about parking, because as my previous comments, especially in townhouses, there's very little extra parking, and with 3-bedroom units, you could easily get 3 adults. I mean, it's 3 adults who are working, who all own cars, and where would they go at that point? It's a minority of people now that are 2 parents and 2.1 children now. It's mainly, we have a lot of people who are single. We have people that are older who are maybe divorced, don't have kids, they're buying units or they're renting. Because I can tell you, as soon as these things get sold, you're going to see 5 for rent signs out in front. And I'm sure Hasib can verify that. You're going to see brand new units who get sold who will then have for rent signs out in front, and they're going to rent rooms, and you're going to get 3 adults because we're going to have a premium price. As we've been told, we're going to have these are going to be very nice, very exclusive. We want very nice in our city. They're going to have a very nice price to them, and it's going to take quite a few. It's going to take multiple incomes to be able to afford these units. And so my fear is that 2 parking spaces is not enough. It's just, are we going to have, I guess this is the question, Norton Scott, is will we have 174 how do I want to phrase this, 174 spaces that are not garages and not driveways? Will we have that level with the, I don't want to say public parking, but it's the common use parking for the private development?
Who was that question directed to?
I guess it's to Norton Scott, probably.
Well, we have 174 parking spaces
So
in addition to.
So your question is will there be 174 surface parking spaces? And the answer for these units, and the answer is no. Outside of the residential area, no. We can't park this at a rate of 3 spaces per unit.
Right, and so that
it just would take up an immense amount of area, amongst other things.
Right, so that means people can't have guests over because there's just nowhere for them to park. There are 6 trains in and 6 trains out. And my friend who lives in Chantilly is not taking VRE to come visit me there. They're going to drive. So, my question is that, so we're underparked. What we're saying is people are going to move in with 2 vehicles, and as soon as a Friday night happens, maybe they can park in the VRE garage, I guess, and walk. Okay? Maybe that's the solution.
Okay, so you're not counting the garages or the driveways?
What I'm saying
is that correct?
There will already be 2 people probably living there. They will already be occupying those spots. Okay. So when Alana comes to my new home in her Prius, and she wants to hook into my electric outside, which I of course will say yes, where will she park?
we're not building the downtown parking for residents. I'm less concerned about that in the downtown because you're going to have people parking in those downtown parking areas as well, right? How are you going to regulate whether they're coming to go to the theater versus going to visit a friend? So there is going to be parking. There's more than enough parking in the downtown for them. But again, they're building this to our current zoning ordinance. So if you have a problem with it, you have a problem with the current zoning ordinance, not with this specific development.
Well, and
that should be an issue addressed via the zoning ordinance.
Well, I've already made that comment, and I made it before this proposal got made.
Okay, but that's what the current zoning ordinance is.
Well, I made that comment about that we needed more parking in the zoning before this proposal got made. So this isn't the first time that I've brought this concern forward.
Correct, but we've taken no action on that.
Okay.
What about across the railroad track? What's going to happen to that lot?
That's staying. That's
Yeah,
parking.
so I mean, that could be additional parking?
Well, my question is so if I come and visit Hasib at his new place, I'm going to be parking in the VRE garage as a guest because the surface spots that are quote-unquote visitor because they're the extra, not in the garage and not in their driveway. What's the expectation? Is that I'm going to park in the VRE garage? Then I'm going to park at one of the surface lots that's even further in the
So they have visitor parking.
Huh?
If you look at that attachment 2, there's plenty of on-street parking, and there's also some of the it's kind of almost like the lots that you were talking about.
Okay. Can you define for me? I mean, I'm looking at the picture is what I'm looking at. What am I looking at? Okay. I mean, so maybe 25-ish?
So everyone has visitors on the same
Well, Friday and Saturday night, people want to get together and
then guess what? You have all of these parking. We have a full 650 parking.
okay. But what I'm saying is my point being is that the residential section of the development will not be able to handle peak level parking, let's say on holidays or on weekends, because there is not enough extra visitor parking built into the residential component, so they will be expected to park in VRE or in the lots that are further out, closer to our businesses. Is that correct?
Donald, I hate to say this, but or about if you have a problem with it, you really need to change the zoning ordinance. It's not appropriate parking beyond what is in the zone. I mean, they're offering more, but what you're asking for is basically a rewrite of the zoning ordinance, which is not what we're being asked to do tonight, or what we're presenting tonight.
I know, but I'm putting on the record that we have a parking problem in this city, and that we're going to.
And we know we do.
And we're going to replicate that problem right here.
Based upon the. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that for the zoning purposes, if it conforms with what the zoning ordinance says, and you're looking to zone it to that zoning district, and that's what's required, then that's all they really need to do. And they're doing more than that.
Do you accept the fact that we cannot require more? Do you understand that?
Well, I will just point out that so let's say, as you're aware, the comprehensive agreement is tied up in how many units they get. So when we start talking about the compensation to the city, we're talking about the number of units they're going to be able to put in there. And I think that this is a good compromise to get the number of units that are necessary and still meet the urban design and still put extra parking out there in addition to what's required in our zoning ordinance. And we have arguably a suburban parking requirement, not an urban parking requirement. So if we're trying to create an urban environment here, which I believe is the intent, then I think they're being kind of generous with the parking. No, I know, but the intent, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth and tell you what to whether to like it or not. I'm just saying that, I understand. What I'm saying is that our ordinance requires one thing, that is for a suburban environment. Try to bring Manassas Park to a little bit more of an urban downtown. To do that, you have to make certain, say, trade things you accept. Now, in this case here, we have a 600-plus space VRE garage that's not going to be used at night that people could use to park. Now, it's, yeah, you got to walk a block or two, but that's not unusual in an urban environment either. So if the intent is to create an urban environment, I think this is consistent with it. If it's not the intent to create an urban environment, then maybe, that's not something.
I just wanted on the record that that's what the expectation is.
No, I'm not arguing with you as what you're saying. I'm just explaining the zoning ordinance component.
No, I understand where the zoning ordinance is. I'm sure they're doing more than they have to. But my point is that we get complaints once they sell these units and they're done and they're gone. We're the ones that will hear the complaints with, how did this get approved and why isn't there enough parking?
I understand that.
But if if the expectation is that they will park in the VRE garage, then if they have extra people over, let's say, then that really needs to be communicated to the people who buy units here.
How many complaints do we get from City Center and Artena about lack of parking?
But this isn't City Center and this is not Artena. Okay. There are no businesses there, as we've been pointed out.
The structure of the parking is not, right? When I did my aerial analysis of the parking spaces, the ratio for residential, isolating the variable because there is no retail, was 1.25, which is a lot less than what we have in our zoning ordinance.
Right, but that's also for apartments, and townhouses are different.
But are these
we're looking at
in the city center area? Because if you look at apartments away from the city center area,
I mean, people that buy units that are $300,000 and $400,000 and $500,000 are going to bring vehicles with them, and they're going to bring more than 1.25 because it's going to take at least two incomes to pay a mortgage that size, and so there will be likely at least two vehicles and maybe more.
you were advocating for a surface parking lot to be constructed somewhere else in the city as a potential option. Where do you get the money for that?
Problem is, or we can't fix it.
Correct. The problem for, I guess I can't mention that for this because it's a zoning issue, but there's a separate problem for the city that's much larger than the parking issue that I can't talk about right now, but is the biggest problem the city's facing. And I keep eating it over and over, and this development does address that.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Is there any public comment? Have any comments or emails or any texts or anything come in from? Okay. Nothing from the public. Chair Polk, does the Planning Commission wish to close its public hearing?
Need a motion from the Planning Commission to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? We stand closed. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. The governing body will now close its public hearing. Do I have a motion? All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, motion carries. Public hearing is closed. The remainder of the agenda is for the governing body, so I turn the meeting over to Chair Polk for any further Planning Commission business you might have.
Additional business to come before the Planning Commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? We stand adjourned. Thank you, and again, we will meet on June 3rd to consider both of these items.
Okay, thank you
Thank you very much.
Chair
Have a good
Polk,
evening.
and thank you to the Planning Commission. And
you.
thank you, Ms. Collier.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Yeah.
Don't you all be out there all night.
We'll try. We'll try not to. Okay.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Martha.
Okay. The next public hearing is for the governing body only, and it is Phase 3 sale of public real property. I declare the public hearing open.
All right, so my presentation's going to cover the Phase 3 and the Phase 4, but then we can turn it specifically for questions about Phase 3 and then Phase 4, but they're so intricately linked that they really both need to happen, and they're very related, which is why I'm presenting both. And so besides the Nord Scott team online, we do have Phase 4 developer here, Mr. Ahmed Aksolio, so thank you very much for attending. So he'll be here as well to answer any... So yeah, they're based out of Liberia Avenue, so they're a local developer, but they have projects throughout the metropolitan area. So thank you very much, Ahmed, for joining us. So again, just as a reminder, this is helpful for the public as well for what we're talking about. The city attorney had a great idea of utilizing Roman numerals for the downtown phasing, because each of these developments themselves have phases within them. So for example, Phase 2 Roman numeral, which is EMSI, right? It had Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 is already done. They're working on Phase 2 right now. Phase 3 has Phase 1A, Phase 1B, and Phase 2. And then within Phase 4, there's also 3 phases as well. So when you see Roman numerals, we're going to try to maintain consistency. When we use Roman numerals, that's really for the entire downtown areas. And then when you're looking at concept plans specific to each phase, you standard numbers, non-Roman numerals there. So just as a reminder of kind of what brought us here, I know I presented a lot in my public hearing just a month ago, the presentation I had. Today I will focus on the parcels and the sale, but I wanted to provide the context for what's happening as a reminder for residents. So we had some goals that we wanted to accomplish that are being accomplished via these sale transactions as well. So specifically for Phase 3, which is the first public hearing, I act a commercial anchor, all Phase 1, and all retail in our region. We wanted to have the garage in the location to maximize retailability, and then we wanted to build additional focus area that was recommended by Street Center. Phase 4 is really about helping us out with the ground lease that we have with City Center. Phase 1 that we need to amend in order to be able to do both of these developments. Phase 4 provides us the best opportunity for doing that, and it provides direct adjacent parking for the retail in Phase 1 to make that more viable as well. And then both of these, again, have additional kind of commercial components as well for the overall developments. So again, just a reminder, both of these phases. So for Phase 3, it is Norton Scott as the developer, and then the planned builder is Toll Brothers for the residential component. And then for Phase 4, we have Auxolio Properties. Updated. As a reminder, this is the same one I went over in the public hearing about a month ago. Again, online on the agenda page for this meeting, there's what's called an attachment 2. It has a lot better kind of updated for Phase 1A, updated imagery, parking layouts and other things as well for both the residential and the commercial component of Phase 1A. But just to focus everyone, you have kind of commercial component. My mouse is not working well here. You have the commercial component for the entire phase. I'm sorry, my mouse let me see if I can get a laser pointer here. I'm sorry, the laser pointer is not working here, but so the commercial area is concentrated over here, including the City Hall building, which is called Building A, and it has some ground level retail. Commercial Building C, which is a standalone retail, and then you have Commercial Building B, which is not part of tonight's discussion, but it's something that's part of Phase 3. That's the commercial anchor with the remaining retail and commercial office. Ideally, we wanted to have the anchor to come in first, but that wasn't viable because of being able to fit them. They only fit on this current City Hall site, and we had to have the new City Hall constructed so we can move across the street, move into that City Hall so that this can then be demolished. But those are kind of the commercial components, and then that's surrounded by 2/2 units. For tonight, as we just discussed, the rezoning of Phase 1A. The transaction. And the City Hall Building A have 74 over 2 condos. Just note this private parcel has not been, is not part of Phase 1A rezoning or, but it of agreement and part of the land transaction. Specifically for Phase 1A, I had this up previously. We had approximately we have approximately 8 acres of city-owned property back in this area, and you have just over 3 acres in the proposed VRE garage site that's currently privately owned, and then you have another city-owned parcel, the 2 acres, what's referred to as a Millicent tract. Here you have the lot with what we're talking about really with the land sale is selling this 8-acre tract to Norton Scott, utilizing the proceeds from that sale to buy this green area to enable the VRE garage, and then to pursue acquisition of this remaining private parcel that's going to be for specifically for commercial use in support of the downtown area. So that's what this is, those land transactions that I outlined. Just kind of Phase 1 is really the development of the adjacent parking lot and of this residential building 1 back here. Phase 2 is the construction of the residential building 2. And remember that we accomplished the main goal from this development with the ground lease amendment and then the additional parking. This is the Phase 3, which would be the commercial. You don't want to overbuild commercial. Once in the downtown, that's when we would pursue. We may have commercial in what's currently market viable, so we want to make sure that the development of that commercial building before we pursue that. Remember, the goal for Phase not any commercial. It was really the part Phase 3, but this is kind of an added benefit when the market allows for that extra commercial building to occur, or if we have some tenants that can work even without the anchor coming in as well. So it's for development at completion. Phase 4, the actual land component. You can see the red here is the city-owned land that we have. Just as a reminder, roughly 2 acres of that is currently ground leased to the Phase 1, what's now called Park 170 at City Center. So 2 acres of that is that parking lot that's ground leased to them, and then these parcels are privately owned currently. Kind of the end result will look like this, right? So we'll be selling this city-owned property, and the main goal is to acquire then this city-owned downtown parking specifically to enable the amendment of the ground lease and to provide adjacent parking for the retail, and then potentially more city-owned downtown parking. However, correct me if I'm wrong, the current agreement is the developer will still pursue acquisition of those parcels as well. But regardless, you can see with the concept plans, it'll always be parking. So we're building on a parking on. You can see how much parking we're building, downtown parking we're building here for development. So this will be parking regardless. It's just whether it's going to remain city-owned or not. It really depends on the viability or feasibility. Remaining 2 outstanding parcels that are part of the vision here, but in reality, this parking is going to support the entire kind of as well.
It's listed as public parking right now in the agreement, so whether
Okay.
they acquire it or reacquire it.
It's yeah. Okay, and then so this was shared at the previous public hearing as well. Okay. This thing's not cooperating. Let's scroll down. this. Does this say it's on current slide? Okay. So this was shared at the previous public hearing. I just did want to provide an update. Yeah. So I did want to provide an update to the governing body and the public since there was additional residential units added since going from 290 to 314 in phase 3. The values have actually gone up. From phase 3 by roughly $500,000 to the city. So the total numbers have increased from when this was last presented to the governing body. So you can ignore the proffers specifically for this public hearing, but this breaks down the land values as well. So you can see that second bullet, the $12.7 million provided for the residential land total between both phases. So you have roughly $1 million in phase 4, and then $12.2 million for the 12 acres on phase 3, and then some additional small amounts for. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Or? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll speak louder. So, you want me to repeat what I just said? Okay. So it's $12.7 million provided for the residential land total, $1 million for the 1 acre in phase 4, and then the remaining $12.2 million for the 12 acres of phase 3 of residential, and then an additional $100,000 for the commercial component. The key is that first bullet where it shows kind of the transaction that occurred with phase 2, how much we received per acre there, which was $44,000 per acre, and it was a majority residential development. So this is a much better deal now with both phases 3 and 4. We're actually capturing more market value for the land that the city is providing. So not only are we getting market returns for the land that we're providing as part of the development, we're also getting all these other benefits that we for both phases for land sale. I don't know if you have anything to add for these public hearings.
And I don't have what's in your packet, but I just wonder, phase 3, the land sale for phase 3, it's the 3 parcels that are what we're calling the Leatherberry tracts. Let's see if Laszlo can pull it up here for me. But the 3 parcels that are called the Leatherberry tract is what we're proposing for the VRE station. The VRE station had been, there we go, so okay, which is not a very good location for the downtown, to assist the downtown. It's not really the greatest location for VRE as well. The 3 acres, the VRE, that was actually the preferred site before. The only downside was it wasn't owned by the city, and VRE needs a publicly owned property. So the developer offered this to basically do this deal where they would pay us for the base track, and we would take those proceeds and essentially buy the 3 parcels that are the Leatherberry tract. So we're going to end up netting out of that transaction about $3.7 million. From that $3.7 million, we would then go and seek to do other stuff down a little bit further away. But the 8 acres that we're showing up there for the base tract doesn't exist in the form that it will be conveyed today. So if you approve the vacation of right-of-way, some of those parcels will go to that. And then not only that, but once we acquire those 3 parcels that are in green there, we're also going to do a boundary line adjustment between the orange, the green, and the blue to get into their final configurations. In the agenda packet, there was the proposed boundary line adjustment plat that shows the final configuration. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that lot 4-2 has not yet been created, and it requires the vacation of the right-of-way and then also the boundary line adjustment. So if you end up approving the sale of 4-2, you'll also have to approve the other stuff prior to that. So that's my point I want to get across. Is there any question about that, or is that too confusing? Did I mess that up? Okay. I don't know, Hector. All right.
No, I don't. It makes sense. These are my comment.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Nothing else to add. I don't know, Ahmed, if you had any words you wanted to say. I guess we can wait for the next public hearing for that one, but nothing else to add from staff.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Public hearing is closed. Moving on to the next public hearing is for the governing body only, and that is Phase 4, Sale of Public Real Property. I declare the public hearing open. Is there anything from staff?
No, nothing else to add.
Nothing else? Are there any questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's plenty of parking, and it's
There we go. That's like.
yeah, and so it's 6 stories because can't you go up to 7 stories in this?
In the city center redevelopment district?
Right.
I believe.
You can go out
It would be
because
more
I'm
expensive,
thinking.
wouldn't it?
I was thinking because
More
that's kind of on the
expensive.
downward slope of Manassas Drive, but I don't know of construction and how that works going 7 stories or higher versus 6. Oops, sorry, Ahmed.
Good evening, everybody. I think we can go higher. The zoning allows it. We might go higher than 6, 7 or 8, but we're going to find that out during the site plan approval process, what works out, because site plan approval process will lay that plan in an engineered fashion. So that's when we're going to find out what we're going to yield land-wise, so how many story we have to go up. So.
But if you go up another story, then that's going to reduce the number of parking spaces per unit.
Oh, that's
right?
true. Yeah, it will.
We're not going to add more units. Total amount of apartments going to remain the same. Building might shrink a little bit.
Okay.
Actually, we would end up adding more parking spaces.
I see.
If you go
I see.
higher.
So
The
you would
buildings
not add
be
more
as big.
units, okay.
Yeah, the footprint would be smaller, building would be taller, parking spaces would be more.
Because your top floors sell quickly, or they?
Yeah,
They fill
it's
up
a matter
quickly.
of cost too. This type of buildings built in Arlington, Ballston, Bethesda, we have a project 500,000 square feet in Bethesda. It's costing us $300 a square foot. The stick-built buildings cost about $110 a square foot. This is a much higher end product. So we are hoping that with the city center development, we'll really have a much nicer environment around where we would attract millennials to come and live in these apartments and bike and maybe forego the car. Very interesting. In Bethesda, we have a project that we got entitled, we are in the plan approval process, 441 units. We were not allowed by Montgomery County to have more than 330 parking spaces, 441 units. And out of that 330, 30 of it was for commercial parking. So 300 spaces was the maximum we can get for 450 units. So that tells you something. But we set aside more space for the bikes. You know, we had a higher percentage of bike parking. So in this type of urban environments, you're trying to push and get millennials to come and to use more public transportation, VRE, so that they can get by without a car, with Uber and bikes. I mean, I remember my college years while I was going to college in Capitol Hill, and I lived in Montgomery County. For 1.5 years, I rode public transportation, bus and metro, and I loved it. So I think the current millennials, our kids, I mean, my kids, they're going to love it. So, Yeah, parking is required in very suburban areas, but urban areas, the comprehensive plans are pushing the developers and everybody to have less parking, to push them to use more mass transit and Uber and Lyft, or biking and stuff like that. So,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Comments or questions?
I agree. I do agree with the gentleman. The only problem is we have no mass transit on the weekends at all.
It doesn't change eventually. I think within about 10, 20 decades, we'll have light rail coming down to Maine. I think in Europe, we have light rail trains that are electric, very inexpensive to build. We don't need big infrastructure projects to carry these monsters, not like our current network system. And eventually, in about 10, 20 years, that'll come. It will happen.
Well, and two-way service. Yeah.
And of course, after this COVID-19, we are finding out that we can get by
If you want to come up.
without having our people come to the office. The in-house counsel doesn't come to the office, so is our CFO doesn't come to the office. And I'm thinking, why should they come to the office? And they're thinking the same way. So I think the commuting is going to be less and less. We are all realizing that we really don't have to be in the office and save our resources in time, transportation, gas, pollution. Why not? I think times will change. A lot of people are going to work out of home and not going to commute as much. I mean, that's my thing.
It's bad for commercial office.
I'm trying to write my office, there's nobody there.
The reason why we don't want to overbuild commercial office. The trends were happening even before there was, reduction in usage of office space. So.
Retail is going to be difficult to rent too, because grab and go and getting delivery, people are getting used to it. They're not going to want to be this close to each other. Like, I think it's going to help in many ways, actually.
Well, personally, I hope that passes. I'm not real fond of physical distancing. Yeah.
We are much more aware now that you get sick, you get too close to each other, you get germs from each other. We were not as aware of that in the past, or conscious of that. Now it has changed. I don't want to get away. My social distance is usually 10 feet.
Okay.
61 years old, so I don't want to risk it.
You don't want to be sick, right? Okay. Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Machado, any last questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, last call. No questions. Is there any public comment that has come in for this public hearing? Okay. In that case, do we have a motion to close? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Public hearing is closed. This likewise, assuming the Planning Commission will take this up at June 3rd, the governing body will take it up on June 16th. Is that correct? They have nothing to do with this. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of the approval of the minutes of May 5th, 2020. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Okay. Moving on to 8A, appointments, Manassas Park School Board, one term effective July 1st, 2020. Do we have a motion? Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Ms. Kirkland is our appointee. Congratulations. I think you're probably, are you watching? Yes, yes, there you go. Okay. Moving on to fleet acquisition. Oh, I'm sorry. Phase 3 comprehensive agreement. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is that all you have for this, City Manager? Okay. Now moving on to fleet management. Fleet acquisition FY21.
I think, is it working now? Okay. Okay, can you all hear me? Yes? Okay. So again, a savings of $1.9 million from FY22 to FY30 in the ramped up enterprise fleet strategy compared to the current plan of what was in the CIP. So you can see the section on top was the current plan for fleet acquisition, and the section in the middle is the updated, and then that table in the very bottom are the existing lease purchase agreements that need to be paid off for our fleet that would be paid off by FY24, so we get even more savings starting in that fiscal year. For FY21, we're only requesting adjusting the current FY21 budget proposal from 3 vehicles down to 1 vehicle to make sure that we're maximizing saving opportunities in FY21 due to COVID-19. So that's, tonight we're specifically just asking for the 1 vehicle acquisition, permission to go ahead and go ahead and plan for that acquisition for FY21, and then to get your thoughts on the FY22 to FY30 model as well.
So to confirm for the public, 1 vehicle acquisition.
Yeah,
Okay,
and FY20.
thank you. Okay.
That was the fire marshal vehicle.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Just as a general, I don't know that we could do 30 vehicles in 1 year. I don't know that I'd be comfortable with that.
Well, there's no way we could do it this year, that's for sure.
No, I know.
No,
I'm not
no,
saying that.
no.
I think we're going to have to
No.
spread it out more.
Because of costs, or because it's the actual opposite? You actually save more by doing it this way. So if it's a concern about perception that we're buying too many vehicles, I can't really address that. But from a cost savings, it actually makes more sense to have this schedule. You actually save a lot. That $1.9 million, if you want to achieve that savings, this is the recommended strategy. So if financial savings are your goals, and I would recommend following this strategy, if concerns about perceptions of buying new vehicles is your priority, I can't really argue against that.
have a question. What would be the savings for half that, for 15?
We'd have to plug in the models, but you're not. You're not getting the goal of the savings is you're getting rid of your older fleet. That's just not efficient. That has too many maintenance costs. You're driving down maintenance costs pretty dramatically and fuel savings by ramping up the. Now, I don't know if we can even do this in FY22. Like, a lot of it's going to depend on COVID-19, but the strategy that we're laying out is to maximize nearly $2 million of savings over that time period. So if you want to achieve more savings, this would be the recommended strategy.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Machado,
And
do you have any?
one kind of input there, just to kind of drive it home, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, of the 30 vehicles, that's just to get us back onto the track with the recommended strategy from Enterprise based on their assessment of our fleet. And just to kind of make sure everybody remembers that kind of that group, we had, I think it was 26 of the vehicles that had an average age of 2004. So when we're talking about old vehicles, we're talking about really, really old vehicles in the fleet, not even just 10 plus, but almost 15 going on for 20 years plus.
Okay, can you repeat
And
that?
that's why we have a really, really high maintenance cost.
Yeah,
Can-
so
can he say
the
that
20, the
statistic
26
again?
vehicles out of that 30 are vehicles that are from 2004 or older.
Okay, 26 of the 30 are 2004
Yeah,
or older.
the average age of those vehicles, that group, because that's kind of driving that maintenance cost for us right now as a city. And the average age of those vehicles is 2004, ranges from somewhere 2008. Some of them are 2001. We even have one that's 1994.
Boy, that's an oldie. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean,
Thank you, Chris.
our maintenance chief just really struggles with keeping the fleet going. It's
I'll
an
bet he
ongoing
does.
source of difficulty when you have such an old fleet.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this.
I'm sorry, it's not even just, and I had a previous conversation with Tom about this, it's not even just the cost of the maintenance, it's also about the availability of getting those vehicles back up. So it's a readiness issue as well.
Okay, okay.
So that's the
Councilmem-
beauty of this is you achieve the savings and you address some operational challenges at the same time. So it really is a win-win.
So it's a twofer.
solution. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Machado, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, what is this car, the one car that is being asked to be replaced? What is this car, what department, and what car, what is the specifications for this new car?
Sure, it's the
And the
fire.
price?
It's the fire marshal vehicle. Chief Soper, are you on?
Yes, sir.
Can you please address the importance of that vehicle?
Yes, sir. So the current fire marshal's vehicle we have is a SUV. It's a 2015 Tahoe that we purchased for the last fire marshal. The goal is to get the fire marshal out of that Tahoe, out of the SUV style vehicle, and into a pickup truck, so that all the equipment he's carrying can be stored on the outside of the truck, so that all the stuff that's off-gassing, because when the fire marshal enters into the fire investigation world, they go into the fire as the post-fire inspection, or post-fire investigation. So everything he's doing it has off-gassing. So we want to get the gases and the carcinogens out of the vehicle with the guy for health and safety reasons, as well as making the unit more functional. Currently, if you look at the current vehicle, he has a bunch of totes laying around in the back of an SUV. Should that vehicle ever be in an accident, our fire marshal is going to be in a world of hurt from all the totes flying around the vehicle. So the current vehicle is not very practical at all. It will also take that 2015 and push it into the place of a 2005 vehicle that we currently have as a backup battalion. So that basically that vehicle actually serves two purposes for us. It frees up his current vehicle to be replaced in 2005, and it gives him a better, safer vehicle for his practice.
What is the price?
So it's $12,000 quoted from Enterprise. It was previously $15,000 from the previous vendors we were using.
Do you have a follow-up? Do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't. Thank
Okay.
you.
Councilmember Sendejas?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So can the 2005 vehicle replace one of the older ones somewhere else?
So I think the 2005 vehicle needs to be replaced. So they're going to take the fire marshal vehicle, substitute, or the current fire marshal SUV, they'll move the fire marshal to the truck, and then that SUV will replace an existing 2005 that needs replaced.
What
Or
happens?
the battalion chiefs.
And what happens to the 2005 vehicle?
So we usually put those up for public surplus sales. For our older fleet, once we replace them, we usually sell and then we get that equity back. And that
Right.
was the other advantage of this strategy. The reason why you're able to get this is because they're maximizing the market returns when you buy the vehicle. So you're timing when you can get maximum sale value. Currently, we're selling a bunch of old vehicles that don't have a lot of use, so you're not getting a lot of money back. But we get something back at least, so it's still worth selling those vehicles.
What I'm asking is can the 2005 replace the one that was from 1990 whatever?
I'm not sure because I thought the 1990s vehicle was an animal control vehicle, if I'm not mistaken. Chris, do you remember which one?
The 1994 is a pickup truck that is actually the utility. So, no, the 2005 cannot replace the 1994.
Okay, but I think there was another
2005
one too.
Needs to be moved on out the fleet. That's at the end of its life cycle.
Okay.
Questions, comments, anything? No? Okay. Staff recommendation is that the governing body authorize city manager to procure one vehicle with enterprise in FY21 per the updated FY21 budget model. All in favor?
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
Aye.
All opposed? Yeah. Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
There should be like a
Okay.
nudge button.
Yeah. Little bell. Okay, CARES Act funding for Manassas Park. Okay, okay. Just leave you off, okay,
leave you off.
okay. We will do that.
Are you leaving entirely, or are you going to stick on? Okay. All right. Okay. So as you all saw on the agenda memo and for the members of the public, we did post an updated version where we added an extra category and then an additional component. So I just want to go over the 8 programs that we're looking at and what that entails again, see if there's any specific questions or any additional programs you want or any changes within each program or anything that we may have left out, because there was a lot to it. There's a lot of good ideas out there to help our community out with this. Of course, this is freezing. There we go. Yeah. Yes and no. Exactly like that. There's what we're taking is there's 2 components. So for the actual work done by Parks and Rec, we're looking at percentages, right? So just like a kind of standard consulting where you allocate, a certain percentage of time you spend on this or a certain percentage of time you spend on that. So we're doing that department wide so that we factor out anything that they're doing for park maintenance, right? It really doesn't have to do with COVID-19 unless it's, they're putting up signage about COVID-19. preparing for the library reopening or anything else that they're doing specific to their mission, we have to factor out the percentage of time that our employees were working for there. That's permitted under. So think of it as the program that was don't let go of their employees, right? They so kind of keep employees employed. That's permitted in this as well for public sector employees, as long as that entity was also involved in COVID-19. So that there's two ways that we're addressing this. So that's what allows us to take the kind of the totality of the payroll. So even, because we decided not to furlough employees and instead use them for COVID-19, we're eligible to recover the total percentage of time that they were spent as a share of their time worked on COVID-19 versus other items, and we're able to reimburse the payroll for the city during that period. And so that, we'll discuss a little bit more during the manager's continue through phases 1 and 2 of reopening until we actually get back to Parks and Rec operations in phase 3. Yeah, so that's what the intent of that is. And so the key thing about that was initially I didn't think you could do something like that because it's talking about existing budget line items, right? But it's clear in there that if you created a budget in FY20 that was for one thing, but then you ended up using that for something for COVID-19, that's now an eligible recovery cost that you can use CARES Act for. Parks and Rec salary line items for Parks and Rec operations for this 2-3 month period, we're not actually using the Parks and Rec, we're using actually for COVID-19.
The entire community center was closed, and it has been closed for 9 weeks or however much long. So I mean, they are obviously not doing their primary duties as they would normally do them day in or week in. That they are clearly doing other activities to support COVID.
So yeah, that's, and I'm sorry that this thing is not working that well, but that pretty much sums up the reimbursement. And you're right about the activities they've done, the extra cleaning, the food distribution was probably the biggest one, the hotline, kind of public information. They've been heard earlier with the map clinic, actual testing, so line management and management of Keith supporting them as well on that. Contact tracing, we've allocated 5 employees of the Parks and Rec Department to help the Health Department with contact tracing as well. So they're pretty much our COVID-19 response team for the city. So we have great justification for reimbursing the city for that COVID-19 activity. That's what they would, yeah. So they're getting, I don't know exactly where they are in the process because we kind of allocated, they get trained by the health department on how to do it. And then, yes, the health department will essentially, as they described earlier tonight, kind of how it works, they're reaching out to people. So yeah, the department wants to know. State is in the process of hiring about 1,000 new employees for the health department specifically for contact tracing, but it's going to take a long time for the hiring and then for each health district to absorb and train those employees. So the hope that is up and running by the time we move to phase 3 and we need those employees back to support. Any questions on program 1?
I have a question. If there's any doubt about the proper funding, is there a mechanism to get a determination from the Department of Accounts in Richmond?
Yeah, I think certainly asking them directly, we can certainly send requests for information on, whether this would be permitted or not. Yeah.
Okay, and presumably in writing, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay.
But that's why they provided that memo, because they're providing kind of in writing what's permitted. So that's why I made sure when I structured this memo, I specifically reference the documentation that they provided that explains everything we're authorized to use that funding for.
Right. But there was some question in my mind when we talk about utilities. May we assume that the difference between An appropriate and a non-appropriate use of funds for that would be the need to provide aid directly to the consumer of the utility.
Oh, so you moved on to a different program, the rent and utility support.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, they specifically actually call out utilities in there.
They do.
Yeah, so they
Yes.
actually, yeah.
No, I read it. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
they do. Yeah.
So, but now the difference is how do you want to do it? So, in other jurisdictions I've heard they're basing it off of income level. That's not how I recommend we structure this. The way I recommend we structure this are those who are actually unemployed, furloughed because of COVID-19. To me, that's a much more direct, response to COVID-19 versus, because if you're just basing it off of income level, well, that sounds like just a general kind of, welfare program and not necessarily a specific COVID-19 response. So both the rent component and the, which is highlighted because I wasn't able to find that when I first attached this, the rent, covering people for overdue rent and then for utilities is specifically called out based off of economic hardships. But I define economic hardships as you lost your job because of COVID-19.
Okay. So, I'm thinking specifically of, say, for example, the water bill. I thought I read it somewhere in here where it cannot be used to benefit the locality. It has to benefit the person that has the utility. So how would that be done? What's the mechanism? Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think maybe a cleaner way than for electricity bill, that's a little bit more clear cut that we can do directly, but perhaps if there's a concern about that, what we can do is utilize a nonprofit, right, where we provide funding to a nonprofit who's providing general utility support, right? But that would probably be a good specific question, because I know that's how some people are doing that who don't have social services departments. They're providing it to nonprofits who then end up helping their residents out with these types of things.
But ours specifically will go through DSS.
Correct, except for the water and sewer. I can see your all's point. There might be kind of a conflict there since it's revenue directly coming back to the city.
We don't want it to appear that we're backfilling.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's really about enabling people to be able to pay their utility bills, but we may want to segregate. Now, we already do that, though, like with our water bills, as the social services department already does that, where we do provide funding support to those in need who can't pay their water and sewer bills. That's an existing program that I would think we would be able to expand because of COVID-19. But you're right, it may not be that clear cut. We may seek additional guidance or provide that to a nonprofit, or at least just focus on electric bills and gas bills, which would help them out. We're helping them out with rent, electrical, and gas, then presumably we're helping them with their ability to pay all utilities as well.
Okay. And, it also appears that there's a distinction between what constitutes hazard pay and the handling of payroll expense as described in number 3 on page 10. Is there going to be any cause for confusion in that regard?
Where are you reading this? Which section? So employee support, hazard pay?
Yeah, hazard pay appears to be a very narrow definition.
On page 16.
Okay, I think hazard as on page 18.
Yeah, so the definition you're saying, hazard pay means additional pay for performing hazardous duty or work involving physical hardship. So clearly it's not going to be work.
So that's very specific.
Yeah. Yeah, so the key one's the first one. So performing hazardous duty, as they're defining it by the document, it's COVID-19. So are you exposing yourself to COVID-19? And clearly this was intended for those employees who continue to do that.
Okay, so for example, that would be the frontline workers like police, fire, and the folks from the rec center who made deliveries?
It's anyone who's putting them, but that's why we have to be clear. It can't just be for all city employees. So anyone who's been working remote right now would not qualify for that. But anyone coming in and interacting with others to continue the fulfillment of our mission of serving our residents during this time should qualify for that. So we have to kind of define the parameters. But tonight we're looking at just generally, do you guys agree with these concepts so we can flesh them out and actually create a budget for them or not?
Okay, as long as there's clarification and a determination from Richmond.
Well,
I don't want us to get caught in a bind.
Ours is a little bit more restrictive than other jurisdictions. I just want to point that out. Yeah, so everyone's going to have to give some money back if they're doing it. But we
Is
can't
gonna have
ask
to
for
what? Everybody's gonna have to what?
give some money back if they're, I think ours is a pretty sound definition. It's anyone who's exposing themselves to COVID-19. I don't see how you could argue against that, but it's something we can send a clarification request if our definition meets that requirement. But they don't define what hazard duty is except for the fact that it's related to COVID-19. So what is the hazard from COVID-19? It's exposure to COVID-19.
So if it was a very narrow definition, then it would only be first responders.
So why?
Hmm?
Why? So our treasurer's like still taking appointments.
Well-
People are coming in and they're servicing them.
Right. But I'm saying it depends on how narrow they're defining it.
Correct.
I mean,
but-
I would not define it that narrow, personally.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm asking.
I'm not sure though the distinction. So if you
Like
really
any
want to talk about the
essential worker.
narrowest, would be any public safety officer who's actually like our EMS, who's actually transported someone with flu-like symptoms. If you really wanted to get that narrow, but it wouldn't be all public safety, right? So it's either everyone who's exposed themselves, or we go that narrow. And I don't recommend we go that narrow. That to me seems excessive. I don't think that was the intent
No,
of this.
I
Yeah.
agree that's excessive. I'm just wondering what they think it is. Because we don't want to have to return any of this funding. That's my only concern.
Yeah, I mean, this is one where I wouldn't have an issue with returning funding because we tried to help out our employees.
Okay.
So we had to return it. Well, at least we helped out our employees. We did our best intent. It's, all it is, it may end up being a budget impact, but at least we called out an ability to help out everyone who was actually being called to come out here and continue to work during this time period. So.
No, I agree with the overall concept.
Yeah, I just don't see us
saying,
having to return it based off of that, just because
Okay.
I've heard others defining it even more broadly than that. I mean, it was all employees. I couldn't see how that was justified.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the
Yeah,
last
some
couple
have
sentences.
defined it as all employees during this time, all public sector employees. I didn't necessarily agree with that. I think
Okay.
that's way too broad.
Yeah.
As long as we can make the argument that we can demonstrate how people were exposing themselves. I mean, you have Keith today walking out in in an area where they're testing. 64% of the people we're testing are actually
Okay.
proving so we're all, as public sector employees, those who are still here working, we're actively exposing ourselves to that risk and our family. So I think there's a clear way to define this that we can justify. But again, I can send a written request to the Secretary of Finance to get clarification if this is permitted or not.
Yeah, I do think it's advisable because I don't think we want to have to return any of that funding.
Yeah.
Because it will impact the budget.
Yeah.
Though anybody that we required to report to work on site, we should pay them.
I agree.
I mean, because
Yeah.
we as the employer required them to report
And I
physically to
agree
work.
with you, I'm just saying it's wise to check.
Yeah.
It's wise to make an inquiry, that's all.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we could defend, though, we required you to come to work, but we're not going to pay any extra because,
Yeah. I think it's a risk worth taking for this one. I can explain maybe offline why I think that. But I think it is a risk worth taking.
That's fine. That's fine.
We can talk a little bit more offline, but
Okay,
I do think it's a
sure,
risk worth taking.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions or comments? No? Councilmember Machado, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, I have a comment. I just want to recognize that, Laszlo, you did a great work setting up the categories and explaining and recognizing the employees, especially from Parks and Rec staff and all the staff that work with you to facilitate seniors' food and the ones that are working, outside with the public during this COVID season. Is so much different to be able to work remote, exposing yourself to go to the public like the essential employees. So because they are risking their health and their household health. And I just appreciate that you all, we are in the possibility to recognize all these hazard, these workers that are exposing themselves to keep the city moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Sendejas, questions, comments?
Oh, I just want to say thank you to our employees for taking the risk for the sake of our citizens in our city. COVID-19 is not a joke whatsoever. Like, I know a lot of people that have been affected by this health issue. Even within my family, my step-grandpa passing away a month ago in a nursing home. It's pretty sad when people are sick or also alone in the hospital. And then when they pass away, like, you're stuck without knowing if you're gonna be able to have a funeral for your relatives. But since then, I want to remind our employees that regardless of the phase 1 or phase 2, phase 3, always take precaution. Just make sure that you're safe and wash your hands and take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Yeah.
One comment, one question. Thank you for all the city employees, and thank you, Laszlo, and everybody who's just done a great job. We're so proud of you during this crisis. I had one question. Did we have any employees test positive for COVID?
We did not.
Okay, I asked that because it's great, but I asked it because in here there actually is a spot where workers' compensation, that this money can actually cover our share of workers' comp and also for unemployment. We can use it for those purposes. That's why I asked if we had any positive people who needed to be out on workers' compensation due to this, because we can use these funds to pay our share of it.
And we've committed to using kind of admin leave to help them out, and that's directly reimbursable as part of this when utilizing admin leave for people who've been exposed or test positive, or as we've been using it as well as permitted with flu-like symptoms to help mitigate spread. So anyone who's had symptoms, we've asked to stay home, and then they've been charging admin leaves, but that's a reimbursable. So that's something Valerie has been keeping account and track of. So, but we definitely want to budget some extra because we don't know how long this is going to last as well.
Asked, since we didn't have any COVID positive, thank God, but how many employees did we have that were on
admin leave,
like admin leave due to quarantine reasons, or a family member was positive even if they weren't? Do we have kind of a count?
Yeah, I would have to get back to you on that. So initially there was a lot from one department. One department was pretty much almost shut down for the first few weeks. But so there has been times, and there was another one that we shut down for 2-3 days until we found out the results. So it has happened where there have been some scares with a lot of flu-like symptoms. Some people really sick, and luckily they tested negative, so that was good. But we did have people that we had to use admin leave for. Yes. Correct. And that's why I'll come back with the budget. When I do that, I can show you actuals, like what we've done, and then I want to set aside some additional funding just in case this is going to probably be an ongoing thing, especially if we have a second wave in the fall. So we want to make sure we're budgeting a certain amount for that as well.
Because we have budget authority till December 31st on this. Okay, that's good.
So we need to figure out how much do we want to have in FY21 and by program for each.
May I ask another question about the businesses? It says we had 35 businesses that were affected by the COVID. Is that that they? One second, I go back to it. Is that they closed, or that they had reduced revenue, or what was the extent of
The 35 are those that fall into the category that the governor specifically outlined as non-essential businesses. So for, gyms were completely closed down, barber shops, salons just completely closed down for this time period. Restaurants.
Can you speak louder, please?
Sure. So these 35 businesses are part of the groups of businesses that the governor has declared non-essential. So they had different restrictions. So like gyms, barber shops, salons were completely shut down, right? There's going to be some ease during some of these phases, but they've, at least for 2 months now, you're talking about some businesses have been shut down. Restaurants have been completely curtailed in terms of dine-in, so that's resulted in revenue impacts for them. So, for example, grocery stores are not part of the non-essential. So if we had a grocery store, grocery stores are doing pretty well, so they probably don't need support. Same thing with convenience stores. There's types of categories that their operations weren't restricted. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't help some of those businesses out, because we have a lot of industrial businesses that sell to businesses who may have been curtailed by this as well. But the first priority needs to be those 35 businesses who were directly told close or you can't fully operate. We need to help them survive this and get back up and running, or else we're really going to have some budget issues going forward as well. I mean, it's an issue, one thing of fairness, where you told them to close down and they're small business owners and they're struggling to survive, and there's a benefit to us by doing this. Think about, we're investing in a quick return of our revenues by doing a program like this to help them get up and running as well. So there's, it's really, this might be one of the most important things that we can utilize this funding for.
Yeah.
And save our local economy.
Yeah, that's important for our businesses, absolutely. Are there any other comments or questions? No. I think you put together a wonderful presentation. I think.
Are there any other programs that we didn't think about, maybe, that we want to explore?
Did we have technology at all?
We did, yeah. That's
a little bit. I saw it's listed, but I wasn't sure if it was just a little bit or.
Yeah. So now that's going to be the next challenge, is coming up with a budget for each of these. Clearly, I think the Parks and Rec reimbursement's going to be sizable, and the business support grants is going to be a sizable chunk. And actually, I think most jurisdictions are utilizing a big chunk of this to help out their businesses as well. One advantage of us not having so many businesses is we can do even more with less. It hurts us in the long run, but it makes our response a little bit easier right now. But now we need to figure out, if you all agree with these programs, then the next step is figuring out what the budget is for each of these programs and defining what we're actually going to utilize this funding for.
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's especially important that we're able to provide hazard pay for our employees, or whatever you want to call it, that we can reward them in some way for everything that they've done during this crisis. It's wonderful.
It is called hazard pay.
It is called hazard pay.
So that's what we want to stick. That's what the definition is. So we want to stick with that term.
Okay. The reason I said that is because it appeared to be a very narrow definition, so I wasn't sure if you were going to call it something else.
No, we're going to call it.
And the only reason I
hazard pay.
suggested the determination is because I see somewhat of an analogy to the NVTA 30% funding, which I've consistently over the years recommended that a letter be sent to the NVTA Council of Councils for approval prior to using that funding, so that to make sure that we don't use it incorrectly. So that's the only reason I brought that up, because if we were ever to have to return 30% funding to the NVTA, my first question would be, was a letter sent to the Council of Councils? That's the only reason I brought that up.
My concern is if we don't get a response, right, from them. I think we have to. That's why I outline it this way. I use clear definitions. So I think if we're getting audited, in my opinion, if we can justify it and cite where specifically we got the guidance, I think we have a really, really good shot. And I agree with the point that having our employees show up has put them under hazardous conditions.
Well, we're fortunate to be able to do this. Any other comments or questions before we Staff recommendation is that the governing body authorize the mayor, the city manager, and city finance director to sign the attached certification form accepting the state contribution of $1,524,888 in CARES Act funding for our city to support our COVID-19 response.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Sendejas?
I said aye.
Oh, I didn't hear you. All opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Also, governing body provide guidance to city manager with respect to COVID-19 programs. Do you feel that you have sufficient guidance?
Sounds like there's unanimous support.
Yes.
I guess if there's anywhere you want me to focus more money on, or
that
just...
$1.5 million is not going to go very far, I have a feeling.
It's not,
It's
yeah.
not,
Okay.
no.
I'm going to try to be balanced, but clearly I think
Yeah.
I try to kind of prioritize based off the listing
Yeah.
there, but I think Parks and Rec reimbursement is
Mhm.
critical, and the business support and then support to our employees. I think those are key ones that we
Well,
need to...
yeah, and everything you've provided so far has been very balanced, so, yeah. Oh, do you want us to vote on that? Is consensus
I
sufficient?
think consensus
or-
is good enough. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's fine, thank you.
No, they already voted on that one.
I'm just glad
Yeah,
we.
there's two motions.
I'm just glad we actually have a pot of money. I mean, usually we get these unfunded mandates with zero.
Okay, next is city manager report,
So Dean will actually start off.
okay?
I just have a feel-good thing for associated with COVID-19. So we had a local business that opened up right before COVID-19 hit. It was the gymnasium, or the gym down here at the Andrew Shopping Center, Unleash Strength. Well, most of these places are going belly up, but these guys do such a good job with a lot of the weightlifters that people actually paid for their membership to keep current during this, even though they can't use it. And so there was a Washington Post article that came out a couple of weeks ago about it because it was so unusual. So I just thought that was kind of a neat thing that one of our local businesses had such a good, strong support from its membership that they're not able to use it, and they're still paying the fees every month just to keep them open. So, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Let me
That's
close
excellent.
this
Okay.
one. Actually, I'm just opening it right up. Okay. So what I've handed out is based off of what we discussed last time. So last time we talked about an interim plan for reopening city operations, and we wanted to wait and see what was going to happen with the governor's executive orders. Since that time, the opening of the economy in Northern Virginia was pushed back to right now March 29th, so it ends at 11:59 p.m. on March 28th. So things would be allowed, businesses would be allowed to reopen under phase 1 parameters on March 29th, unless it gets extended again. But there's, what's that? May. I keep saying March. Still in March. My apologies. May, yeah. So it got pushed back to May 29th. My apologies. I keep doing that. May 29th is the tentative date for phase 1 reopening of Northern Virginia. If that gets pushed back again, we need to talk about what do we do. Are we just going to align ourselves with phase 1? Do we want to do earlier? Do we want to do later? What I laid out to you is kind of what we talked about last time, and just kind of updating it based off of the the facts that we've received over the last 2 weeks. So right now, the phase 1 currently estimated May 29th by the governor, but subject to change. So the recommendation would be to open up City Hall on June 1st. I know that's kind of where we were leaning to last time, was either June 1st or June 10th. But June 1st would be, pretty much in line with that phase 1. So we'd be reopening City Hall to our customers, but with that social distancing line management that we outlined last time for how we would control for that to protect our employees and our customers. Social services would remain, by appointment only. Community center would remain closed, except as part of phase 1 there is allowance by the governor for places of worship to reopen. And since our community center houses some of them as well, we want to make that available for those institutions. Of course, we would need to kind of ramp up cleaning as well and help them with social distancing. But that's pretty much what the community center would be doing at that time. Water park would still remain closed. No city events during phase 1, and then employees who can telework would still continue to telework through phase 1, and then we would still continue the previous guidance on, if you're showing symptoms, stay home, and we'll cover you with admin leave. And that's when we may want to consider still through phase 3 as well, until really there's a vaccine or some kind of treatment as well. So that's something we really have to think about. Masks and gloves when we're interacting with the public to help limit spread to our public and to the employees that they're interacting with. And then we try to do some initial kind of screening, temperature checks, trying to provide service in a safe way if someone is showing symptoms but is still looking for customer service from our employees. And then of course increased cleaning operations with the reopening of City Hall. So again, Parks and Rec staff helping out with City Hall, with line management, with extra cleaning during phase 1. Phase 2, unclear timeline, but it seemed like it was 2 to 4 weeks in between each phases. So phase 2, maybe sometime between June 15th, July 1st, unless the May 29th date gets pushed back even farther. But let's assume sometime between June 15th and July 1st, we would be moving into phase 2. There's not a lot of changes with phase 2 that I'm recommending, except social services providing some expanded customer service if they can, as long as they maintain social distancing in their lobby. So we'll probably manage it like we're doing the treasure right now, the buildings department, where if a customer does come, there's a number out there they can call and then schedule an appointment to come in. So we would reopen social services that way. We'd bring back our teleworking entities back 25% back here to start reintroducing employees on site as well. And then phase 3, we would look towards the governor's guidance at that point. Right now, if you look at the federal guidelines, there's not guidance for phase 3, so I'm assuming we'll get a little bit more, but look for that one more like in July or August for us moving in phase 3. But the goal for that one is we reopen the social services office completely. We're reopening the community center. At all the places that we're reopening, we're continuing to encourage social distancing. We're going to keep, the tape, showing kind of designating kind of 6 feet space, try to kind of space out equipment and everything else so that people can still practice social distancing at our facilities during phase 3. The community center or the Parks and Rec staff would go back to their normal Parks and Rec functions, so they'd be pulled away from COVID-19 support, including line management, all those things that we talked about. That means the end of the food support operations as well, and we'll come back and give you a pretty comprehensive summary of everything we did with food support, because it's been a pretty good program that we've had. We would try to open up the water park as soon as possible once we move into phase 3. If at that time, now the state is still evaluating what they want to do with water parks, outdoor pools, but to do that, we need just maybe a couple weeks so we get word and move, a month of act to that water park if it's determined to be safe to do so, and then bringing back 70 or teleworking until there's an effective treatment for COVID-19 or a vaccine. We want to keep 25% in reserves just in case you get, an outbreak within a certain department and everyone has to go home there. Well, then you bring that 25% in to then cover for all those people that were quarantining. So you still want to keep some teleworking opportunities for our employees, so you don't have to completely shut down as departments if there's spread within a specific agency. And we can't do that, unfortunately, for all of our departments, because our employees, most of our employees have to come in and physically continue to provide services to our customers. And then hopefully we can start doing smaller city events where we can continue to space people out and keep it a reasonable number. I'm hoping they come up with clear guidelines on what phase 3 will look like, because right now there isn't. It's phase 1, it's 10 people, phase 2, it's 50, and there's no guidance on phase 3, and it just, to me, doesn't sound right to go from 50 to unlimited. So I'm assuming there's going to be some guidelines provided in phase 3, and then post phase 3, when effective treatment, vaccine, there's no second wave in the fall or winter, professional sports are back up and running, and crowds, concerts, all those things are back to normal. We can end the local state of emergency finally. We can bring back 100% of our employees if we choose to do so. We may want to keep providing some teleworking opportunities if it's found to be a popular program for retention opportunities as well. And then we would resume our large-scale city events at that time. So that's kind of the tentative plan that I wanted to go over with you all and see if you were comfortable with this, if you wanted to, move up, push back, how we want to manage this, or if this sounds and looks right.
I'd say my only comment was, and this is well thought. I mean, I don't know that any of us know exactly what the exact right mix of is. I guess my one suggestion would be is maybe when we hit phase 2 is to then start ramping up the training and everything for Parks and Rec, for the water park, because it's summer and it's a timely issue, is that as soon as we hit phase 3, we could immediately open.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think the training's easy. It would be the recruitment, right, and the hiring. Like, we would have to pursue that. So we may end up hiring a bunch of people who then, let's say phase 2 just drags on and the governor doesn't allow us to go to phase 3. Then we've hired a bunch of employees who then we're not going to be utilizing for those water park operations. That's the main reason for the delay, is once we get the word. So if we know, like the governor's saying, yeah, in 2 weeks you can go to phase 3, at that moment you ramp up the hiring process for those seasonal employees that we need for the water park. So definitely, you're right. Like, once we get signaled with advanced time that we can, so all preparations will start in phase 2, and but the actual hiring, unless we want to hire before we know we're moving into phase 3. So if you want to hire people in phase 2, we can do that.
Yeah, well, my thing is then you got people on board, because if we wait, every other water parks, every other park authority, et cetera, is, Prince William, Fairfax, whatever, they're going to be after the same pool of people, and, we're going to have trouble trying to recruit people, because, the other bigger jurisdictions that pay better are going to, start, bringing on their employees, but also for the service to our residents, because, it could be 90 degrees outside, and, we're now in phase 3 and our pool's still closed because we don't have enough people in the right places yet to be able to open. So if we were going to phase 2 to phase 3 in April, I might say wait till phase 3, but in terms of this is timely, in terms of it's going to be the hot summer, it's going to be June, it's going to be July, people are going to want to get out and, hey, let's go to Signal Bay, let's go to the community center, whatever. And so that was just my only kind of quibble would be, is maybe we could up that part for the outdoor water park a little bit, so that we would be ready to go as soon as we go to phase 3, that we would, and we could still do some social distancing, or we could still do, limited, like maybe we can fit 400 people there, maybe we only, bring in 200 guests, maybe that we trade that off, is that maybe we don't have as many people in, and then we allow that to kind of ramp up as we get more comfortable with the operation, and we're able to, we're able to see it successful.
So hiring of seasonal employees for the water park in phase 2. That's something you'd add here.
Whereabouts in phase 2?
Well,
Because there is a certain level of uncertainty here.
Well, true. I think we're going to see that, because the rest of Virginia is already in phase 1. They're already there. We're still in phase 0, but the rest of Virginia went to phase 1 on Friday, so, maybe we can look to the rest of the state, Yeah. I don't think anybody's going to open a water park in phase 1, but, well, no, even though they're ahead of us, they're not that far ahead of us,
He does have a 3-week buffer time for hiring and recruitment.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
At phase 3, he said he's not going to open right away at phase 3. I think he said, what, 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, that was just to ramp up, so, but I think you raise a good point, like, if we're gonna be constantly 2 to 3 weeks behind the rest of the state, we may have that lead time that when they move into phase 3, we know that likely, so maybe it's when the rest of Virginia moves into phase 3 is when we start ramping up hiring. Is that what I'm saying?
Right. And, because, I agree. I mean, that's my only thing is because of the timeliness issue, because it is seasonal.
Yeah.
Because it would seem like a lot of work and a lot of training and a lot of hiring to only be open for a month. That maybe we might get, maybe by July 4th we could have the water park open. We might be to phase 3 by maybe, July 4th-ish, like that week or right around that holiday.
Yeah, that makes sense, so.
I do think we should exercise caution when it comes to the water park. There's going to be no social distancing at the water park. So if we're worried about no immunity once you get it once, if we're worried about a second wave in fall, opening a water park seems incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah, I think we still have to wait for the guidance, right, from the state. Because I think when we asked the question during our calls, they said they're going to evaluate what to do with outdoor pools. So they're supposed to be giving us guidance on that. So I'm hopeful we have it at that time. And to Councilman Shoemaker's point, we'll see what everyone else is doing in phase 3 and what we kind of have that luxury where we can see what the impacts are, and we can stop it if we don't feel comfortable at that point.
But the rest of Virginia is not as populous as us.
Yeah.
There's a
That's right.
reason
We're
they're open
concentrated.
ahead of us.
We are.
So we can't follow in their footsteps exactly.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, absolutely. I was thinking that we can bring people on seasonally for a limited cost because they're hourly employees.
Yeah.
We can pay them a little bit of training, do training hours, or show up and do orientation kind of thing. It's not a major investment.
Yeah, you're right.
They're making $9.50 an hour, and we paid them 10 hours maybe, and then maybe we never open, maybe we never get to phase 3, or we don't get to phase 3 to August.
And perhaps it's premature to make that decision now. Maybe we should be into beginning phase 2 before we really make that decision.
Right, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, is that
Yeah.
I think the concern is we would get stuck in like maybe phase 2 and we wouldn't get to phase 3. I think that was what's not here to do, and I guess that was my thing.
Yeah.
It's not that expensive to bring people on. If you're only paying them a few hours, kind of get them up to speed and then have them ready to go. But if we never actually go and phase 3, we haven't invested that much money into people.
Well, and
That's a good point.
here's just a thought. We have cut down the number of vehicles that we're ordering to 1 because we're on the very leanest of budgets. So I'm concerned about hiring somebody that we're not sure what's going to happen with the water park. We really are not. Alana's point is very well taken. It could turn into a petri dish for all we know.
We're not going to get COVID from the pool, we're going to get it from each other.
At the pool, while we were at the pool.
So, I could just add evaluate during phase 2 timeline of the water park, so. Because we'll come back each phase and just
I
evaluate.
forgot to ask you, do Miriam and Hector have a copy of this?
That's a good point. They do not. I've been scrolling through it, but my apologies.
Yeah, I don't have a copy, but I can
Okay.
see it right now.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. I have a comment. I like how you phased down phase 1, 2, and 3, but I agree with Janet. We need to slow down a little bit. First of all, we need to always be vigilant for the health of the city employees, for the customers. Also, we need to slow down. I think we have to revisit phase 2 and see how this evolves. Regarding planning for opening the water park, Signal Hill, let's slow down because families take their children, school-age children. We are just getting more reports of the kids with inflammatory diseases the numbers are higher now. So just slow down for a little bit.
So do you all feel comfortable then with reopening City Hall in Phase 1?
Councilmember Sendejas, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Are we meeting on June 2nd? Is it something we could kind of evaluate then? To vote on the comprehensive agreement?
We are, yeah. We're meeting on June 2nd for the budget stuff and the comprehensive agreement, the budget public hearings.
So would it be possible to talk about it then, possibly do it June 3rd, 5th?
So don't open on June 1st, make the decision on June 2nd?
And perhaps open the second week of June? Would that?
Yeah, we could do
Does that turn
that.
time too fast for you?
No, we can do that. I mean, we're preparing right now, anyways, so we'll be prepared. In our minds, we're preparing for the June 1st opening, so we just delay it while we have everything lined up.
Yeah.
So it just would be
Because
a
we'll
speed
hear
thing.
from the governor on the 29th.
Correct. Well, hopefully before then. On what's gonna
Hopefully,
happen.
yeah.
I always go back to first principles, right? So does the staff feel safe, or are they at risk if we open up, early or later, or, I mean, and do we have much demand to be open? I mean, that's what I'm thinking of as the reasons behind opening or not.
I think from a safety standpoint, yeah, you're always going to be safer with this strategy of remaining closed.
Right.
I haven't heard of the demand for customers wanting, City Hall, but I do think about, bills and other issues. But we are still servicing people. It's by appointment, so we're still doing it in a safe way. So I think it's about just rejoining the rest of the economy that's opening up at that time. I think that would be the purpose here. Why are we different from them? Right would be the argument. But certainly, if your priority is thinking about employee safety first, and you're not hearing a lot of demand from residents to access City Hall, then yeah, it'd be reasonable to push it back further.
Right, because I'm thinking we've got this 64% positive rate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and the doctor even said we're kind of a hot spot relative to other clinics or areas that are testing. So I keep that in mind, and so I think, okay, I don't mind opening a little later, just to make sure everyone's safe, because of this information we were just given today.
There's nothing wrong with being more cautious.
Right.
Even though the NVRC is trying to get the region to do things in unison, I don't quite know how I feel about that, but I think if we err, let's err on the side of being cautious.
Right.
I will just make a mention that, real estate tax bills are due June 5th. So we actually could get more demand than what we're seeing right now because, people are paying water and sewer bills. They're sticking them in that outlet back over here. They're sticking them in that metal container. But, people might come in and pay, there are going to be people that need to come in and pay real estate bills with cash. Especially, not exclusively, because I do it as well, but, a lot of our Hispanic residents will come in and pay real estate bills in cash.
We do have a lot of cash payments.
And I don't think that people are going to feel comfortable, doing cash payments into the Dropbox or they're going to have to go into a store and try to buy a money order. I mean.
That's a question to ask staff.
I mean,
how
at
much
least
is
maybe
cash? What percentage of people?
Oh,
pay
it's
cash?
a majority. People pay,
Is it?
in terms of total transactions.
real
I have to
estate?
look at not for real estate, but for total city transactions. I haven't looked at specifically for real estate, but for total city transactions, Councilman Shoemaker's absolutely right. The majority of our residents pay in cash for.
Okay, I thought he was referring to real estate.
But that's lumped. I mean,
right.
We'll look at real estate specifically, but I'm talking about for everything that happens in the city. The majority of it is cash transactions.
Okay, and that doesn't surprise me, but the real estate would surprise me if it was a majority paying in cash.
Yeah.
That would surprise me.
It's something we can look at.
That's a
Well,
lot of money to pay
I will
cash.
I will say is I pay cash. I have to write a check for both houses, and I've had to pay cash for my parents as I'm working through the estate. So I've had to come in and pay $2,000 in cash, and I'm not alone. There's a whole long line of us paying cash for real estate bills. So I mean, there's a lot of
The lines aren't as bad as the personal property, but yeah, you do
Right.
have lines, yeah.
Right,
so.
but the transactions are actually bigger. Because, personal property might be like $100 or $200, but, real estate bill might be $2,000 or $3,000 just for one, So that's just my concern is that maybe June 1st, we could open up the treasurer's office as a soft opening. Maybe the rest of City Hall stays closed. Maybe that's our soft opening as we open the treasurer's office. We get staff where we're doing social distancing, that we're managing the lines. Maybe we work one office at a time, and maybe we reopen slowly, but given that maybe that office needs to be open first, given the June 5th deadline. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, even with this plan, like the building permitting office is still not, it's going to be by appointment still only, because you don't have a lot of space there for lines. So it's, it's not a bad approach to start kind of department by department. So you're not kind of, but treasurer, you're right. I mean, that is going to be the primary one driving people. And, but as we get closer to the elections on June 23rd, we're also going to see a lot of people for the registrar as well.
You may want to check with the treasurer and see what her
Yeah.
comfort level is.
I could do that, and I can send you all an email.
And most
after.
importantly, break it down to safety first and then this demand. Because nowadays, especially with the reopening of phase one, people feel like their money's being prioritized over safety.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that to our city staff and change the morale.
We could consider deferring or not charging penalties and interest, for a couple weeks for the real estate tax bill.
I guess my first something I wouldn't feel comfortable putting $2,000 in an envelope, sliding it down into the metal drop box.
Well, I hear you.
We're not saying to do that.
Well, I'm
No.
saying is if the treasurer's office isn't open, what would you suggest?
Well, he just made a suggestion.
Yes, maybe we just delay the penalties and interest
For a week or two.
for a couple, until.
Can we do that also?
Yes. So it's not always an easy process, but from my understanding, I can follow up with the treasurer again tomorrow, but I think we could do it for that. It's water and sewer, we weren't able to, I think for water and sewer, we were able to. For penalties and interest, we weren't able to adjust the online, the credit card payment stuff, but we were able to defer penalties and interest for water bills. So I think we could do that for real estate tax bills. So from what I'm understanding, potentially June 8th now. We make the decision on June 2nd. But I'll circle back first with the treasurer and see how critical it is for them to be open that first week of June and get back to you all.
Oh, yeah. Sounds good.
Okay.
I think this is good. This is a non-monetary value that we can provide for our
Do you have anything else
city
for us,
employees.
City?
No, that's it.
Okay. City Attorney, do you have an additional closed meeting for us?
We were going to go in and talk about conference of agreement, but have anything to talk about.
Okay. Fine with us. Okay. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Opposed, abstained, we're adjourned. Thank you for tuning in, Miriam and Hector.
Thank you.